Hey guys. This is part 5 of What If Naruto Was in the Warring States era. Hit like and subscribe if you like this one, and also please check the author in the description. Let's start. Chapter 17, Into the Deep. Naruto, Tenten, Shino, and Hana stood at a precipice overlooking a canyon that looked more like a quarry. Despite the vast size of it, this was most certainly not natural. It was man-made, with levels of earth scooped out to form shelves too perfect in formation to be something that occurred in nature. Not in such a short time. This was never on any of our clan's maps, Hana whispered, frowning as she checked said map over. They had been using the maps that Naruto's party had brought because they were newer, but nothing like this had been on it. Tenten could see how put out Naruto was at the whole thing. Minato had bought those maps for him on his last birthday. They were as new as could be expected, only 4 years old, but he had been given a set that covered most everywhere in the elemental nations. They had served them well thus far. Shino, however, was all about functionality and getting the job done, and thus brought everyone's concerns to attention. Conflict be damned. I hope you don't mind my asking, Naruto-san, the bug-using shinobi said. Why, you wonder? Because I feel I must ask, how old are those maps? Hana frowned and turned it over to look at the date it had been marked with after its completion. Not that old at all, she said, impressed. We don't use maps to travel very often, or tend to stray into places we're unfamiliar with. Every Inuzuka has the entire Hai-no-Kuni countryside memorized, she reasoned, folding it back up to stash away. We're not in Hai-no-Kuni anymore, though, Tenten said in return. But I get it. No need to waste resources and put yourself at risk mapping out a place that you're never going to go. Hana sighed and kneeled down to rub the heads of her 3 Niken. We don't get a whole lot of business outside of our area to begin with. It's rare. Our clan isn't exactly rich. Definitely not enough to pay for mapmakers every few years. Either way, they were at a gigantic quarry-looking place that didn't look like any sort of excavation site. The only reason they figured that it wasn't one was that there was a full shanty town of shacks spread out across the leveled layers. There was no work being done, or anything that would make it a real quarry, so it was a mystery as to what this place was for. Naruto shook his head. There's no way all this would just pop up. We would have heard about it from someone, somewhere, right? But this can't be that old if it's not on the map. He wanted to rant, but he wasn't going to start a rant on maps. Not in front of someone outside of their inner circle, at least. That was a friends and family sort of action. It was a pain to think about, and in the end it didn't matter. Naruto eventually shrugged his shoulders and started on the way down. They weren't going to get anywhere just standing around. Hana's dog said that this was the right place, so it was up to them to check things out for themselves. They didn't necessarily have the luxury of waiting around for someone else to gather their information for them. Taking the canister from the Uchiha clan was a temporary fix at best. They would get more once they found out it was lost, and they would do it soon. The only way for the Inuzuka clan and subsequently anyone else it would be used against to fight against the virus inside was to find the antidote, and find a way to produce their own. XXX being on the ground level with a sprawling flock of shacks, things were even worse than they thought they were from afar. Even with her nose broken, Hana's nose wrinkled at the unpleasant scents she had been picking up from the squalor. It wasn't clean. What amounted to homes for hundreds of people were comprised of sheets of scrap metal and anything else that could be used to create walls and a roof. Doors and windows were nothing more than sheets hung over the most gaping openings in these shelters. There was nothing around resource-wise for a full 2 square miles, and very few of these people seemed to be trained in any sort of martial art or survival. They were civilians through and through. Families, both full and partially fragmented. Lone travelers trying to make it all alone. It was a dusty hole in the ground with people living there. That was all it was. People with hollow looks in their eyes, all mistrusting everyone else not directly associated with them. All staring at the 4 strangers. The healthy, fit newcomers. Not a mark of sickness, blight, hunger, thirst, or anything on them. If only everyone else could be so lucky. God, Naruto said, getting an eyeful as he looked around at everything they were passing. Dirty, disheveled men gathered in packs. He could see a few of them carrying short blades underneath their clothes. Mothers sat alone, huddled with their kids, holding their wailing babies. What's happening in this place? I've seen this kind of thing in the past, Tenten said, holding a hand on her own shoulder as she walked. You've never seen a refugee town before, have you? Naruto shook his head, wondering why Tenten's tone was so somber. When the wars happen, and a town is in the way, it stops being a town as far as both sides are concerned. It's a point of contention. They'll fight over it. They'll fight in it. Block to block, street to street. And Naruto didn't need to be told that a lot of the time, the town didn't survive the battle. Even if it did, the people who did have their homes, livelihoods, and their possessions destroyed would oftentimes have nowhere to go or much else to their names. Tenten clearly spoke from first-hand experience. The hollow look in her eye at bringing up the topic clearly put her in a place she'd rather not have gone. I spent time in a place like this during the last Senju Uchiha War. After my parents were killed, I just started following the other people that were running away from the fighting too, and one wound up springing up. She explained. When it started breaking up, and people started leaving, looking for another one to take refuge at, I left. I had to. That place would have killed me. Not just because there was nothing there for people to subsist off of. The entire atmosphere, it was like an aura of doom hung over it. No way out, no way back to the way things were when they were better. Just no hope all around. There were worse things around there that they were seeing, that Tenten hoped she wouldn't have to see again. When she was young, she wound up near the town that Naruto and Kakashi wound up stumbling across her in, and fortunately had a work ethic from a farming family. She did small odd jobs for various shops, households, and merchants that passed through, likely pitying her until she proved she could actually work. That was how things had been, at least until Minato showed up and taught her a little about being a shinobi. Enough so that she could at least learn how to trap small animals, find food of her own, survive. They were little things that wound up adding up for her. Little things like that always wound up working out in some kind of fortunate break eventually, as long as she worked hard enough and believed she could find a way. It was an outlook she'd always kept when things started looking up. Caught in her thinking of worse times, she noticed Naruto staring at her, a concerned look on his face. What? Nothing, it's just. Naruto didn't know quite how to say it without fearing that he would offend her. Tenten was tough, and she didn't like being pitted for anything. We don't hear you say anything about how things used to be before we met. You don't talk about it much, about what happened, I mean. Tenten bit her lip before putting on a smile that she dropped upon seeing his frown. He knew it was fake and she didn't bother keeping up the pretense. Yeah. It's hard to think about. Those weren't good days. It's over now though, so don't worry about it. She assured him with a nudge. But anyway, yeah? This place is a refugee town. A big one. It's weird though. What is? When places like this pop up, it's usually around something. Tenten told them. Like a body of water with a ferry that comes through to take people to the other side that can afford it, or outside of a town or city that's actually doing well. Those sorts of things. But what the hell could be here to gather around? There was nothing. It was just a huge dirt ball. No trees or plant life of any kind. No drinkable water source anywhere nearby. No city where charity and assistance might come to help them. No method of getting themselves farther away from whatever ills had befallen them elsewhere. It didn't make any sense to Tenten, who knew a thing or two about this sort of happening. These kinds of places didn't just come together around nothing. None of you look like people trying to run away, a person suddenly said, getting their attention. You actually look more like the types that people like us try and run from. It was a teenager, a bit older than most of them, clearly a refugee like the rest of the people of the town. Run away? Hannah asked aloud. As far as she and the rest of them knew, there wasn't any kind of conflict going on at the moment that would suck anyone into it who needed to escape. Run away from what? I didn't know there was a war going on in this part of Hai no Kuni. The young man shook his head and ran a hand through his hair. Hai no Kuni isn't the only place with these problems, you know, he said with a scowl. Nobles from your country do hire ninja clans to go into other countries to strike at their political rivals. And then they hire clans of their own from their country, and there you go. It really isn't any deeper than that. Go get paid to inadvertently start a war with another clan trying to protect the holdings of the noble you were hired to take shots at. It was something that happened more often than anyone wanted to take note of. In cases like this, war was business. It was payment that would become blood money when your bid to cause trouble inevitably led to bloodshed. Naruto wished there was some overarching, grand, true reason for why so much fighting occurred, but there really wasn't in most cases. It was disappointing. You sound like you know a lot, he told the refugee youth. The young man smiled wryly. More than I really want to, I'll tell you that much. Either way, you don't look like you're here to cause trouble," he said after sizing up Naruto, Shino, Tenten, and Hana. "Couldn't imagine what you'd want to for anyway. There's nothing around here for you shinobi types. So welcome to town." As though there were much to see. "This is a town?" Hana wondered. "It looks more like hell." The young man wasn't offended, and neither was anyone else that heard her say it in passing. He simply nodded in understanding, shoving his hands in the pockets of his holey trousers as he fell into step with the ninja contingent. "You can say what you like. Just think of it as waiting on the outskirts of hell for a shot at getting into heaven." Intrigued, Shino raised an eyebrow behind his sunglasses. "What do you mean?" That was an interesting turn of phrase. At this, light came into the young man's eyes. A place where the fighting happening all over the continent can't touch. A place with enough food, water, security. For everyone. The deep. A smile almost came to his face as he talked about it. Naruto squinted and shaded his eyes with a hand, trying to peer out over some kind of distance to see if there had been anything they had missed before coming down into the pit. "If there's a place like that here, where is it? And why aren't you there instead of here?" The young man didn't seem to have a problem with answering these questions at all. This was clearly the hope that all of these people were gathered for. You have to be let into the deep. No one gets in without an invitation. And from what I hear, only so many people can live there at one time. Makes sense, doesn't it? He pointed down underneath his feet. It's underground. Now Tenten's eye had a sparkle to it. One of vested inquisitiveness. An underground city? Her interests as an inventor, tinkerer, and a designer were all piqued at the prospect of such a place. What does it look like? How do they stay supplied? Why is everyone so certain about the quality of life down there? What kind of architecture allows for a comfortable living area there? Who runs it? Why? If people only get invited down there, how do dash? MMPPH. She was cut off from her line of rapid questioning by Naruto grabbing her and covering her mouth, moving her back far enough to give the young townie some room. She had been progressively shortening the distance between the two of them to an increasingly uncomfortable degree as she continued to speak. Curiosity killed the cat, after all. And in this case Tenten's curiosity would scare off one of the few people they had come across in the shanty town willing to talk to them about anything. He knew her well enough to know that left unchecked, she'd have grilled the poor guy until he did feel bothered by their presence, something he didn't seem to be at the moment. Naruto pulled her back far enough before removing his hand from the pouting girl and chuckling sheepishly at the young man in front of them. "Sorry, hehe," Naruto said. "But yeah, what she said. No one up here has ever seen it for themselves. But we've seen people go in there and come back out. People like us, that were out here, waiting, we've seen some of them go in, and when they came back out, either to invite other people down, or to go off to get supplies or whatever they do, they look completely different. Strong, clean, and healthy instead of a good number of the people waiting outside. Well-fed, well-nourished. With purpose and confidence in their eyes, and the belief that the tribulations of the past were over with and done. It wasn't a restored sense of hope that the ones who went down and later came back out for recruitment or for other purposes had. Hope was what had led people there in the first place. It was what came to their eyes every time the topic of the deep came up in their presence. It was something else. Something better. But it all seemed too suspicious, especially since this was the place that Hana's Ninken had led them to, as far as the last cent on the bioweapon canister. Believing in the noses of her trained partners and valued friends, Hana asked the question that had been sitting on the tip of her tongue since they had been told about the place. "So do you think whoever runs the place would let one of us go down there for a look?" she asked, only for everything to seemingly stop. Not only had their guide ceased leading them along, the looks from the surrounding populace became that much harsher. "What? Did I say something wrong?" The young man who was their guide took a deep breath as though he were counting to 10 and turned around, willing to explain. Almost a little too happy to explain. "No shinobi are allowed into the deep. Period," he told them. "It's supposed to be a sanctuary. A safe haven for people like us with no stake in all of the fighting, no way to get away from it. If shinobi were allowed down there, how would that make it any different from the rest of this rotten world?" It was an accurate enough sentiment. One that had been admittedly well earned over the years, but also one that Naruto was sad to hear. Still, when one's ilk had turned the world inside out for as long as anyone could remember, Was it really that surprising to hear that shinobi were so feared and disliked by any particular set of civilians? But there was something wrong with that. If there were no shinobi allowed in the deep, how exactly were the people inside planning keeping them out if they were letting people in periodically? Hana grabbed onto Naruto's arm, pulling him back a bit, Tenten and Shino picking up the slack to cover for them as their guide continued leading them. "This is definitely the place," Hana said to Naruto discreetly. "There's more to this deep place than what this guy is telling us. Or more than what he knows," Naruto commented. "He's never been there, if you want to believe him." "Do you?" "Yeah," Naruto said, much to Hana's surprise. "The way he's acting when he tells us anything, it's like he's talking about the land of milk and honey or something, you know?" Hana grumpily conceded the point. Everyone didn't have to be out to get them all the time. "True. You can't really fake real enthusiasm for something like that. But that just means we've got to figure out how all of this works so we can get down there ourselves." Naruto looked away somewhat sheepishly, not meeting the older Kunoichi's eyes. He knew all he would find there would be expectations. Expectations he could not fulfill at that particular moment. "I'm working on it." For some reason, that didn't fill Hana with much confidence, and Naruto couldn't blame her. She had only been around them for a few days and she apparently already got the picture when it came to the group dynamic. Naruto wasn't the plans and solutions kind of guy. That had never been his strong suit. It was something that Minato hadn't been able to pass down genetically. He was more of the figure it out as we go along kind of guy. XXX. "Mama, why is Ruto and I always gone?" Kushina had taken Kanako away from any sign of danger to meet back up with Minato, while Naruto took care of his job for Inuzuka Hana. Of course, this eventually led to the questioning that was expected to come from an inquisitive child. Somehow, saying that Naruto had run off to find a mad scientist just as willing to experiment on him as shake his hand and get the cure for a destructive virus that could wipe out an entire clan within days didn't seem like it would help Kanako sleep easily at night. "Naruto has a mission right now," Kushina assured her, smiling down at Kanako. "He's just helping the lady with the puppies. He'll come and meet up with us again soon." That answer didn't sate Kanako in the slightest. It was here that Kushina forgot that Kanako was much sharper than Naruto was when he had been 3. When Kanako asked why something was the way it wasn't just childlike curiosity, or a way to annoy the adults around her. She wanted a legitimate explanation that she could understand, damn it. Kanako knew where Naruto was. She always knew where he was. He always told her, either before he left or right after he came back. She never knew what he was doing, of course. He was smart enough to omit all of the violent facts of his sojourns, but where he was, yes. He kept her informed of his whereabouts when he could. "No," the miniature redhead said with a pout as she continued to hold Kushina's hand. "Not now. I mean all the time. Daddy's gone a lot because his job's so important, but I see Daddy more than Ruto and I." Kushina sighed, wondering just how to explain this. Kanako knew what a Jinchuriki and a Biju was. She knew that Naruto was a Jinchuriki. It was information they gave to her early on so she would be used to it before it ever affected her. But that just meant that Naruto's circumstances were normal to her. She didn't understand just why any of those things about him were significant, and hopefully she wouldn't for a long time. Even so, she had asked a question, and when it was about Naruto, Kanako wouldn't take the parent sort of because I said so response. If she had to, she would seek out Naruto's friends, or God forbid Anko or Kakashi whenever they ran into them and get her answer from them. "Your brother is special to your father," Kushina said, wondering how she was going to put this. How did Naruto always do it? Kanako always ate up everything he ever told her. "Of course he's special." A grin spread across Kushina's face at the loyalty of her youngest child. "That's not what I mean." All of a sudden, it hit her. Whenever Naruto told Kanako anything he wanted her to remember, he tended to make it a story. "Okay, a long time ago, before you were born, something happened to Naruto that made everyone think he was a bad, scary, dangerous person." Kanako furrowed her brow fitfully, trying to wrap her mind around Naruto being anything other than the awesome person she that knew him to be. "But Ruto and I isn't bad or scary." "We know that, but a whole lot of other people don't. Either that, or they don't care," Kushina muttered, remembering how infuriating things had been back with the Uzumaki clan after Naruto had become Kurama's container. "Anyway, one day your daddy climbed all the way to the top of a tall mountain to talk to a wise old monkey man who knew everything." "Why?" Your daddy wanted to ask him about how to make his village that'll bring everybody together. And the old monkey man told him lots of things. One of the things he told him about was Naruto and Kurama. Kanako knew about Kurama. Naruto told her about Kurama all the time, and how he was a gigantic fox that Naruto used to hang out with when he was younger. But only Naruto could see him because he was inside of his body. That wasn't fair. She wanted to see Kurama too. How'd the old monkey man know about Kurama? I told you, the wise old monkey man knows everything. Kushina could see why Naruto liked turning everything he told Kanako into a story. She could explain almost anything. She didn't have the time, and Kanako didn't have the comprehension for her to go into with storybook logic. This was after the bad thing had happened to Naruto. The wise old monkey man told your daddy that the world would never think that Naruto wasn't bad and scary, so he said that your daddy should use that to help get people to work with him. Minato and Kushina had discussed using Hiruzen's advice for Naruto's status for so long. And by Minato and Kushina discussed, Minato had been the only one speaking. Kushina screamed for most of the conversations. In the end, Minato had been able to convince her that it was for the best and that Naruto was tough enough to take it. He shouldn't have had to take it, but her baby was a fighter. It took a while for her to figure that Naruto had perceived just what was to be done about his situation with Kurama, and had accepted it. And so Kushina and Minato's eldest child was to be the next real-life boogeyman of the ninja world. Kushina hated it, but Naruto never complained, nor did he let his role consume him. Naruto was willing to endure whatever the world thought of him for something out of his control, just as long as it was helping his loved ones. It was while thinking about this that Kushina realized Kanako was still waiting on the rest of the story. So Naruto goes out on missions all the time for Daddy, talking to other ninjas, trying to get them to listen to Daddy's idea. And whenever real bad people show up to hurt him or someone he loves, well, Naruto shows them he's even badder, and lets everyone know it when he does. He was a Jinchuriki for show. In the end he was still a son, an older brother, a friend. He was still Naruto. Kanako was lost. She had followed Kushina's story in its entirety, but there was a part that she didn't understand. I don't get it. How can Daddy use people thinking Naruto and I is scary? Probably the hardest part of the explanation/story. Kushina stopped and kneeled down, as close to eye level as she could get with the tiny girl. People are scared of things they don't understand, and no one understands much about Naruto. Even himself, unfortunately. There was almost nothing to go off of when it came to learning about Jinchuriki. It was entirely undocumented. According to the head of the Sarutobi clan, only lost, dusty old tomes that they didn't have access to would have anything sort of information on Jinchuriki function. Naruto and Kurama had been trying to work out how to make their odd partnership work all on their own, and their success in that department had been limited to say the least. No one understood. I do, Kanako offered, tugging at her mother's hand to get her moving along again in a particular direction. She didn't know why, but for some reason she felt like she would find Minato if she went that way. Naruto and I's my big brother. He can do anything. He's even stronger than Daddy. Oh really now? Kanako let out a gasp and ran for a shady tree along the path that she barely saw Minato standing underneath. Daddy! Minato stepped out into the light, a massive grin on his face. Hi baby! He kneeled down to hug his little daughter who came rushing at him. Minato took her in and held her close. And just where'd you hear that Naruto was stronger than me? He asked in a joking tone. From Naruto and I. She pulled her face out of Minato's chest long enough to give him a look as if daring him to dispute her. It warmed his heart that she was so loyal to Naruto. He sincerely hoped that things would always stay that way. Well, he might be one day, Minato offered before getting serious. But you heard your mother's story, right? No matter what anyone says, no matter what other people think, no matter what you ever see him do someday, don't ever be afraid of Naruto. The thought was absolutely foreign as far as Kanako was concerned. It had never entered her mind. XXX, Tano Kuni, refugee town. Tenten rubbed her arms uncomfortably as she stood in the longest line she had ever waited on in person. She was all by herself, transformed into the appearance of a refugee girl for the sake of blending in, all for the sake of finding out more about just what the deep was. While being led by their guide, a call amongst the refugees had come up that selection would occur today. Everyone immediately dropped what they were doing and rushed as quickly as they could for a single location, their guide included. It was there that the plan had come together to try and blend in with the general population. Since Tenten was the only one of them who had ever known what it was like to be a civilian, she had taken it upon herself to volunteer. She still felt uneasy about being around anything that reminded her so resolutely of how her life used to be before she had become a shinobi, but it was for the sake of the mission. Plus, being anxious actually helped her with her cover. Ugh, Tenten thought to herself, shifting around in place as she stood and waited in her disguise. For what? She didn't know. What am I doing? I make weapons and hit people with them. I don't do subterfuge. But she was the best person equipped for the job. After all, she was the only one that didn't have a hive of insects living inside of her, or had distinct, hard-to-disguise animalistic features, or a being of nigh indescribable chakra living inside of her. Tenten was the least suspicious by far. All of the others had been raised to be more than someone in the crowd. At least there had been a point in her life where she had known what it was to be a regular person, which was why she could fit in. That wasn't exactly the case for the group of ninjas watching over the entire situation from one of the quarry shelves overlooking the desolate landscape. Naruto, Shino, Hana, and her Niken kept themselves out of sight, maintaining a watchful eye over anything funny potentially happening down below. At least from their elevated position they had finally gotten a look at the entrance to the deep, not too far away from where the people were lined up. From just the looks of the way inside, the place seemed to live up to its name. A great concrete, circular hole in the ground, covered by an impenetrable iron door. That door opened, and suddenly the formerly listless refugees sprang to life, standing straight-backed, at attention, trying to look their absolute best as though they were on display. In a way, they were. 3 men exited, coming up from the staircase within the entrance to the deep, their eyes sweeping over the people gathered for their appraisal. Naruto immediately smelled a rat. I thought shinobi weren't allowed in the deep, the blonde Jinchuriki said, upon seeing the welcoming committee. Those guys are fucking shinobi. I know a ninja when I see one. Shino nodded in silent agreement, though he had figured that something like this would be the case. Someone with the resources to construct something akin to the sort of idea that the deep was, would have likely had to have something to do with the military classification that reigned over most of the elemental nations. There had been a better than 90% chance of it. All right, everyone, line up, one of the shinobi said. He had dark brown hair with black eyes. His outfit consisted of a purple loose-fitting vest that showed his chest. The rest of his midsection was covered with bandages. He wore a light blue wrap around his neck and black wrist warmers with tan pants. His demeanor was calm and pleasant enough, but to the 3 on the hill, and 10 and below, they knew he was a ninja, no question. There are 5 places open in the deep this time around. Murmuring started amongst the gathered folks. But much to Tenten's surprise, despite the conditions and the tough-looking demeanor of some of the people around her, none of them were muttering anything about storming the door to get themselves in. As a matter of fact, Tenten thought to herself, fretting as she maintained her transformation, why isn't the town built closer to the door? Apparently there was some kind of decree in place courtesy of the shinobi that existed down within the deep. There had to be, otherwise the shelters would have been crowding the entrance. It was the way these places were usually set up. The speaker continued as he and his associates seemed to inspect the people, one by one, outright passing most of them by without taking a single look. For those of you who have never been through this, we need you to remain in place until we either pick you out or head back in through the entrance. As you all know, there's not enough space to accommodate everyone, he said, the laid-back tone in his way of speaking convincing those waiting that his words were honest and true. If you're not selected this time, don't worry. The deep is always expanding, and soon there will be enough places for you all. We always let more in, don't we? And so it went. The welcoming committee walked along the line, ignoring the vast majority of the people amassed as they looked for something within the subjects before them. Apparently they found it, as a nudge from one of his partners stopped the speaker, directing his attention to someone. Leaning out of the lineup, Tenten was able to see that the smiling person brought out of the long queue was the same person that had been speaking to them earlier that day. The look of complete elation on his face couldn't have been faked. She would have felt good for him, had she no sneaking suspicion of something odd going on. Either way, the transformed Kunoichi went back to seemingly minding her own business, waiting for them to get ever closer, this time with her group's previous guide around the shantytown following along with them. Nearby, out of sight and above the flatland level that the selection process was taking place on, Naruto, Shino, and Hana continued watching over the scene. They had also noticed that their guide had been the one selected first, and due to their previous close proximity to him, one of them had managed to notice something significant about the young man in the short amount of time he had been in their presence, something relevant to what was going on. By far the most attentive of the group, Shino's insects inside of him told him something that the others wouldn't have been able to know themselves. "Naruto-san, that person has a significant amount of chakra," he revealed, speaking of the man that had just been accepted. "By that reasoning, I believe the criteria for being accepted into the deep is a level of chakra acceptable for a person to train as a shinobi." Really? Now that was what Hana called shady. Most of these people are adults though, which meant a very minuscule amount of them ever had a chance of getting in to begin with. If you weren't trained to access your chakra as a child but did so after reaching adulthood, you wouldn't have a very impressive reservoir of it, and chances were that you never would. It was like a muscle, a sensitive muscle that needed to be well developed over time. It was why people couldn't just take up arms one day and out of the blue decide to be a shinobi. It took peak physical and spiritual conditioning to do. Pleased that Hana was on board with his line of thinking, Shino continued to elaborate. "Exactly. Which is why they are selected instead of the first few healthy people in line being taken straight out. If my hunch is correct, I believe Tenten-san will be one of the people selected today." Something like that simply sounded too good to be true, or too bad to be possible, even for their combined fortunes. "How can you be sure?" Naruto asked. "They could always find someone else in the line with good chakra before they get to her. They didn't seem to be good enough to just outright peg who had good chakra and who didn't without getting close. Close enough to look them in the eye to get a good feel for what they had. The welcoming committee was still a long way from Tenten, though they didn't seem to be any closer to slowing down or stopping than they had been previously." Shino quickly debunked this line of thought, holding up his hand with one of his kikeicho on his extended index finger. "Of 3 spots available, only 2 people down there have any significant amount of chakra. Tenten-san is one of them. That would be a stroke of luck, both good and bad, that none of them could have possibly expected. But it was also much more danger than Naruto had expected he would have subjected Tenten to as well." Outside, while she was hinged on the ground level getting a first-hand perspective of the selection process, she still had Naruto, Shino, and Hana covering her from afar. If she was selected and wound up going down into the deep, they wouldn't be able to follow her. Once she was down there, if something went wrong, and it was almost certain that it would if they were being realistic about their chances, she would be all alone. Naruto's foot drummed on the ground nervously as he thought of how to approach this. Tenten could get in, most definitely. If there was a censor there, they wouldn't select a shinobi for reasons unknown to them. They would pick a civilian. Out of the 4 of them, Tenten's chakra most closely resembled that of a regular person because of her lineage, because she was first generation. She had no shinobi in her family line that would pass down any chakra signatures to her, and what she did have wasn't exceptionally overwhelming. If this worked right, they would sense her chakra and find her to be nothing more than a gifted young woman. Whatever they did, the call would be on Naruto, and he needed to make it fast, as they were scouting through the people at that very moment. He was the one in charge, so he had to choose correctly. Risk Tenten being selected to go into the deep and trust in her to improvise and make it out, or pull her out now. They would lock it down, of course, but they could take what they had learned here and try to find another way in. What would Dad do? Naruto wondered to himself before Kurama chimed in helpfully. "What does it matter what he would do? You don't think like him, you don't work like him. What your father would do is irrelevant." With his Biju friend's prompting, Naruto clamped his jaw shut tightly and shook his head, banishing the previous thought from his mind. "No, you're right, screw that. What would I do?" That was what really mattered. With that in mind, he turned to one of his closest friends for counsel. "Shino, how much do you trust me?" "With my life," Shino answered succinctly and honestly. "How much do you think Tenten does?" "More so, I would venture." "Does that extend into believing in yourselves as much as I believe in you guys?" Naruto asked, confusing the young ninja at the roundabout choice of wording in that statement. "I mean, I'm trying to say, do you think that she thinks she could make it if we let her go down there?" Shino took a moment to think about the question, and what he knew about the girl that they had in harm's way down below. "I believe she would have no doubts that she could survive in this situation." "Why?" "Because I would think that she knows you would never knowingly put her into a situation where you thought she would die." He wouldn't, and there went his answer. Naruto let go of a deep sigh and turned his attention back to the lineup. Somehow at that moment, Tenten looked up and he could have sworn she locked eyes with him and smirked, if only for a second. That drove it home right then and there. She could do it. She knew that she could, and she wanted to make sure that he knew she was capable of handling herself. "We'll let her go," Naruto ordered begrudgingly as he watched Tenten be chosen from the line, just like Shino had suggested she would have been. "No pretenses. But god damn it, we're finding another way in there." "Of course," Shino said in agreement, as though there were never any doubt. Hana gave a determined little nod. They were all in agreement as to what would be done. Now everything just needed to be executed. XXX, Northern Hino Kuni, Sasuke stood in front of his brother, back ramrod straight, eyes set to the ground. He had sent 3 runners from his squad back to the war camp to brief Itachi on the situation, but he hadn't expected Itachi to return with them, to hear things from Sasuke's own mouth. He also hadn't expected Uzumaki Naruto's group to outpace them so much. They had left the Uchiha contingent in the dust, causing them to have to make up more ground than Sasuke had originally anticipated they would have when he told his forces to retreat outside of Seaside Village. Sasuke hated the feeling of being the little brother in the shadow of an older one such as Itachi, but even as he did nothing more than stand in front of the man, Sasuke could still feel the sheer presence that Itachi commanded just from being around. He was a man to ignore at your own risk. Having been told the story of the missing canister on 2 separate occasions, Itachi simply looked at Sasuke with his impassive expression. "It is of no concern," Itachi said, dismissing Sasuke's nerves at the situation. He could immediately see the tension drain from Sasuke's posture. "You are going to retrieve it as we speak. Aside from that, I feel Father's decision to order the bioweapon be brought in was a hasty decision to begin with. Walk with me, Sasuke." Sasuke raised an eyebrow at the odd request, and at Itachi's open questioning of the orders that had come from their clan head. Still, Itachi was his brother, and the man that Sasuke looked up to more than any other, so he listened to the request, taking a short stroll with Itachi through the streets of the small one-road outpost town they had stopped in. They walked far enough away that Itachi felt Sasuke would be comfortable having a candid conversation out of earshot from their clansmen. "Please, know that I did not come out here to emasculate you. You are a fine shinobi. Everyone knows it," he assured him. "I merely came here to warn you." Sasuke rolled his eyes. "I know that the canister has been taken out of our clan's usual area of operations," Sasuke told him, wondering why Itachi was concerned. "It wouldn't be the first time he went abroad for a mission. We can handle ourselves." That wasn't what Itachi wanted to warn him about. He stared at his beloved younger brother for several seconds before speaking again. "Sasuke, why is it that you seek glory?" Somewhat stunned by the sudden question, Sasuke took a moment to carefully regard how he would respond. "For the clan, Itachi. Like you," he said. A fine, textbook answer. If his father had asked, he would have gotten a nod of acceptability for the political answer he had given. Really though, he just wanted what Itachi had. The respect of being one of the best, and if he were to be honest with it, a bit of the fear as well. Everything Itachi had done since the day he had first taken to the battlefield. He had been putting the Uchiha clan back on the map again after decades of decline at the hands of the Senju clan. Itachi found himself disappointed at Sasuke's cut-and-paste answer. "I don't fight for the glory of anything, Sasuke." His motivations were always mistaken for the wrong reasons. "Not for the glory of the clan, nor my own glory. I fight because I hope to one day put an end to all of the fighting." Does that make sense? It didn't. Not to Sasuke. It was their job to fight. All of their lives, it was all they had been prepared for growing up. Sure, Sasuke wanted to send the Senju clan into obscurity once and for all, but other than that, "I don't see where you're coming from," Sasuke disclosed. "Itachi, this is what we do, and we're the best at it." Itachi reached out and poked Sasuke in the forehead with his index and middle fingers, eliciting a scowl from the younger Uchiha. "Sasuke, there are still so many things about this life you haven't witnessed yet. Haven't taken part in yet. I hope you never do, but I know that you will." He didn't want Sasuke to be like him, but the way things were going, not only would Sasuke be just like him, he would be worse. Because unlike Itachi, when the atrocities of his actions began to pile up, would Sasuke even see them as such? When you've seen your first innocent town burned before your eyes, set by your own hand, I want you to think of what I've just said to you. Sasuke wanted to talk more, but Itachi broke apart into a murder of crows that flew away into the sky. His wise older brother's words echoed in his head, but Sasuke quickly shoved them out of mind. He had work to do, and nothing Itachi had said was relevant as far as he was concerned. Just an awkward attempt at bonding. TCH. Sasuke scoffed, turning on his heel to return to the rest of his clansmen. We don't burn innocent towns. We're shinobi, not monsters. Triple X, with Tenten, the Deep, it took all of 5 minutes for Tenten to truly question whether or not she had bitten off more than she could chew. After being selected from the lineup, a few more people were chosen, with much less care than her and the guide that had been selected first. It just seemed that they had been pointed at randomly, with nowhere near the scrutiny that she had endured at their hands. At first she figured that they had focused on her because they had seen through her henge, but she hadn't altered herself too much from her actual appearance. Nothing that you could tell by touching or looking, and definitely nothing that could be easily disturbed. She had only changed enough so that their guide wouldn't make her if he happened to see her. That hadn't been it, as the issue had never been raised. Though she had been scared out of her mind when she and the young man that had been her group's guide in the shanty town were separated from the others that had been taken. Which was where she was now. She had been put into a sterile, white room with a shower and a uniform waiting for her inside, told to remain there until someone came to get her. Only she and the guide had been sent off into these rooms, while the rest of the people brought in had been herded off elsewhere. I really don't like this, Tenten said to herself after dressing herself in what she'd been given. To keep from transforming too much of herself and putting herself at more risk of being discovered, she had changed into refugee rags that she had found in the shanty town after the people had gone to gather at the entrance. Naruto had asked her where she'd gotten the clothes. All she told him in return was that there were plenty of people not using what they were wearing anymore. That drew the train of conversation to a grinding halt. Either way, she was out of them now, and into her new threads, hopefully temporarily. If nothing else, she could try and be somewhat herself. With that in mind, she put her loose brown hair up into her favorite twin buns. As she did, a knock came at the door before the same man that had been recruiting outside came in, smiling at her. I see you've freshened up and changed into what was left for you. Thanks, Tenten said, finishing up her hair before looking herself over. They had given her a skin-tight black bodysuit that she was to wear underneath a long, gray/light purple tunic with a dark gray belt. These feel like fighting clothes. Rank-and-file uniforms. This wasn't supposed to be a place for shinobi? Well, come with me, the easygoing man said, motioning for Tenten to follow him. She figured him to be her guide, but he wasn't saying anything to her. He was simply leading her along through the winding stone hallways and corridors lit by candles. It made her feel claustrophobic. I bet you're wondering what you're here for. To live here, right? Tenten said, trying to play up her role as the clueless regular person. That's what the Deep is for, isn't it? The man turned back to her for a second to get a look, his smile never leaving his face before he returned to being silent and leading her along. Eventually, the hallway opened up into a large chamber with a massive snake statue sitting on one side. The fire in its eyes illuminated the shadowy room. Dirt covered the floor, and in the low light, Tenten could see blood staining it. A better look at the other side of the chamber caught her a view at two attendants dragging a body out. A cursory glance at the face of the corpse revealed to her that it was the guide that had been taken first along with her. The expression on his face was the unmistakable look of horror, surprise, and betrayal. Goosebumps rose on Tenten's skin. All of a sudden, a chill filled the chamber, and she wasn't so sure it was because she was underground. What happened? She asked, guardedly, and rightfully so. Her new guide only kept smiling at her. It wasn't nearly as comforting as it had been for the people outside. He wasn't worth the spot, the man said. Hopefully you are. What am I supposed to do then? Survive. This wasn't supposed to be a place for shinobi. A hand reached for her from the shadows, but Tenten had been aware of shady happenings from the moment she had walked in. She avoided the grab and turned around, quickly backpedaling away from her assailant as he attempted to strike out at her with open hands. Tenten dodged blow after blow, heart thumping in her chest. She knew things weren't as they seemed, but she didn't think they'd figured out that she was a spy. Not so soon. She had assured everyone that she could handle things on her own. She had kept Naruto from charging in to get her out and keep her from taking the risk. Dying so quickly wasn't supposed to be on the table. Son of a bitch! The kunoichi in disguise cursed to herself. She had brought some of her things, but they were all sealed away in a single storage scroll that she had hidden on her person somewhere, rather sensitive. She wasn't going to be able to get to it in a timely manner, and even if she did, her cover would be blown. Well, there was nothing incriminating about knowing how to handle oneself in a fist fight, and all her enemy was doing was taijutsu. Tenten moved out of the way of a few more strikes before lashing out with a jump kick to the body that drew a pained grunt from her target. Aiming her fist at his throat, she found her punch stopped by a strong grasp around her wrist, and subsequently felt her energy leave her. As she dropped to her knees, the worst feeling of nausea and depletion filled her senses, and it only increased when she felt his other hand touch her throat and slam her to the ground. Flailing her head around to keep him from grabbing, she was able to get his fingers by her mouth and bit down on them. Hard. The man let out a yell and he pulled away, letting Tenten scamper to safety, albeit temporarily. This guy drains chakra. Tenten thought to herself in a panic, having felt her life force drain from her body. Having so little chakra in comparison to Naruto and being forced to keep up with him quite often, she knew what chakra exhaustion felt like. While she hadn't been brought to that level in the few moments that she had been touched, she knew that it had been coming if she had remained in her previous situation. It explained why the young man who had been dragged out as a corpse had no visible wounds on him. This person had drained him dry. With her hands in the dirt and sand as she crawled away, Tenten's hands brushed across something hard. Immediately, her eyes widened at the feel of a weapon in her hand. There were weapons hidden in the dirt. Getting back to her feet in a hurry, Tenten turned to face down her enemy once more. Now able to get a good look at him, he wore some sort of veil over his face and tiny sunglasses covering his eyes. Honestly, she didn't care what he looked like, and he didn't care that she hadn't the slightest look of fear or humor on her face. Perhaps her dislocating 3 of his fingers with just her teeth had something to do with it. He shouldn't have been playing with his food, so to speak. The veiled man charged right at what he thought was a civilian girl once more, only for Tenten to stomp down on something in the dirt, pushing up the business end of a spear that she grabbed and seamlessly used to run the man through, up and underneath his rib cage with one stroke. Her aim wasn't just perfect when it came to throwing things. Tenten followed through as the body fell, jabbing the spear all the way through on the way down. If he got back up from that, he would have had to be a zombie, and even if he was, she'd kill him again regardless. It hadn't been a difficult battle. Just unwelcome. This had happened to the poor fellow who had come before her. A young man that had been so hopeful. He probably felt as though he had finally been somewhere safe, only to be thrown into a death game he'd been given no warning for. Tenten shut her eyes and said a silent prayer for him. Hopefully the next life would be as peaceful as he'd hoped it would be. She didn't spare the same gesture for the man she had just impaled. He didn't deserve the courtesy. Huh! You killed Yoroi. The man who had led her into a situation meant to end her life said, mildly interested in the outcome and not put off at all that she'd disposed of his hitman. You weren't supposed to be able to kill him. Wasn't she now? Well, if you didn't want me to kill him, Tenten said, twisting the blade into her victim's body for emphasis and pulling it out with a scowl on her face. You shouldn't have sicked someone on me in the first place. The world up there sucks, and I'm not some pushover. I didn't say you couldn't kill him, I just wasn't expecting you to, the man said before rolling his eyes at the sight of Tenten still ready to fight him. That's it. It's over. You passed the test, and then some, I'd say. Test? Tenten spat disgustedly. This was a fucking test? People don't want to come down here to fight and kill. They're trying to get away from that. They don't deserve to come down here into a meat grinder. She hadn't said anything, but the man before her spoke as if he was certain he knew where her questions would lead. No one deserves anything just because they've had a hard time of it, he said, causing her heart to leap. Had it been all over her face, or too much in her voice? Life isn't about what you deserve, it's about what you want, and what you can take. And down here, if you want a place where your entire life isn't directed by every little clan scrape and dust up, you have to be strong enough to be of worth. You are. The other one wasn't. Why was he talking about just her and the other person that she saw dead on the ground not too long ago? Other people had come down there as well, and he didn't make it sound like any of them would be getting the opportunity that she had. Tenten bared her teeth for a moment before scoffing and tossing the spear to the ground. Whatever. Are we done? Do you want me to run a whole gauntlet, or was that the only guy you want to send out to kill me? I could have stayed up top for this. No, you're done, the man said. You're going to fit in just fine if that's what you can do without any jutsu. Welcome to the deep. You can call me Rinji. Tenten wanted to stab him in the face. She wanted to wipe that stupid easygoing look off of it and make him feel like what that young man had felt when he had been put to the test. But she couldn't. There was more to this place than just the sick little gladiator games it took to apparently get in, and before she started letting her sense of morals cloud her judgment, she had to remember that the fate of an entire ninja clan likely rested on finding a cure to the biological weapon that had already taken down a minimum of 2 clans. Hannah said the last person that had interacted with the bioweapon canister was down there in the deep. Tenten was going to find who it was, find the antidote, and then from there, who knew? Then she could try and bring the whole thing down on her way out. Preferably with lots of well-placed explosives. That thought put an honest smile on her face. Glad to be here. XXX, with Naruto. Hannah went along with Naruto and Shino, her Niken keeping a nose out for any unwanted company, as they still had possession of the bioweapon canister that the Uchiha would undoubtedly be coming after. It was too important a resource to forget about for multiple reasons. The group traversed a hilly, woodland area, doing just as they had sworn they would. Find another method to enter the deep. Tenten would not be left by herself down there, no matter what. No one spoke about their concerns, but it was written all over the face of Naruto. Hannah had noticed that he was poor at hiding his feelings. Even if he didn't say anything, whatever his mindset was could be read just from looking at his expressions. If there is another way in, I'm certain that my insects can find it, Shino said, him of all people being the one to say something in order to try and break the tension between all of them at letting one of their teammates go at it alone. Insects can find their way into just about anything. Naruto also had clones of his own scouring the nearby countryside, but if he had to put money on it he would have bet on Shino finding something before him. I'm not worried about that, he said, throwing on a grin and patting the bug user on the back. If it's you looking, Shino, I definitely know we'll find it. Hannah bit her lip, wishing that her own nose was of more use. Alas, it was still damaged enough from her injuries that she couldn't smell things out very well. Do you really think she can handle it? Naruto spared her a side glance, his supportive grin dropping from when he'd last been talking to Shino. Tenten'll be fine, he told her with complete certainty in his voice. Hannah didn't outright understand it, how he could have so much confidence in that one lone girl. But she's not a dash. She can handle it, he repeated in a way that said not to underestimate Tenten because she wasn't a shinobi with a clan pedigree. She had gotten enough of that over the years, everywhere they had gone. He wasn't going to do the same after she'd spent so long proving that it didn't matter. Trust me. Skeptical as she was, Hannah left it alone. She would trust their judgment, for now at least until it was proven to be wrong too. It wasn't as though she were in a position to do otherwise. Even if she went off and tried to do things on her own, she doubted she would get far. What in the blue hell? Naruto's exclamation grabbed her attention. He had stopped and turned his head in one particular direction with no feasible stimulant to make him do so. Without warning, he took off running, and Shino followed via some sort of unspoken understanding as to why he had left so abruptly. Hey! Hannah called out after them, giving chase until they both stopped by a rapidly moving river. Following their gazes, she caught what they were looking at, a body caught between 2 jagged rocks. If Naruto's clone had dispelled to alert him to that find, she could understand his being startled by it. The body was one of the people that had gone down into the deep with Tenten. To be more exact, it was the one that had been their guide through the shanty town beforehand. Naruto immediately jumped from rock to rock until he was able to get to the body and pull it free, partly hoping that he was still alive, but he knew better. The blue-tinted, clammy skin and the wide-eyed look. He was gone. Even so, it was just common decency at that point to fish him out of the water. And it was fortunate that he had, because Hannah's nose worked well enough from a close range to something to pick up a trail off of it. The body hadn't been in the water long enough for the sense of those who had handled it to wash off. If she could smell it, her Niken definitely could, and better yet they could find where it came from. There's still a scent on him, Hannah informed her temporary allies. I think if we move quickly we can catch up to whoever dropped this guy off. I don't think he was thrown in that far upriver, so we can still get a trail leading back to wherever they came out from. Naruto let out a sigh and formed a clone to at least try and bury the body of their guide properly. He was definitely one of the ones called down there, just like Tenten. They could probably catch up to whoever dropped the body. If their job was only to dispose of it, and they were lazy enough to just throw it in a quick-moving river, they probably weren't hustling back either. If this is what happened to him, and it's just 5 hours afterwards, what's that place supposed to be? What did he let his closest friend head down into? Chapter 18. Our Little Pandemic. We're catching up. Hana announced as she led Naruto and Shino through the trees. Ever since finding the body of their guide in the slums floating in the river, they had been in pursuit of the people that had dumped him in the water. Human scents are getting stronger. What exactly are we going to do when we catch him? Naruto asked. I mean, we'll have to fight. But we can't kill him, can we? We need to try and get some information. At least a second way to get into the deep. This may be more difficult than just ambushing a group, Shino said, his brow furrowed in thought behind his sunglasses. Why, you ask? Because I'm afraid interrogation isn't my strong suit. Naruto let out an irritated grunt. It's not mine either. If you want me to seal something or punch it in the face, cool. Anything else, too bad. Finesse work was not his thing. It was one of the reasons that Tenten volunteered to be the one to try and get close to the deep to figure out what was going on there. However, going in was never part of the plan. And she accused Naruto of freestyling too often during their more sensitive strategies. This was all making Hana's head hurt to think about. Naruto was treating Tenten being trapped alone the way she would have about one of her own clan members. None of you are related, and I can't ever remember freelance shinobi sticking around each other long enough to have the kind of rapport you all have. Especially you and that girl. She had never been subjected to any real camaraderie that extended beyond clan connections. Who is she to you? It was a fair enough question on her part. My important person, Naruto said gravely before realizing that Hana and even Shino were both staring at him as though he had grown a second head. One of them. I've got a bunch of important people, Tebeo. He hurriedly added, but it was too late. Hana didn't believe him. For a girl who tamed dogs, Hana certainly donned the expression of a sly cat very well. Sure. Naruto quickly blew the entire thing off after the fact though. Hana's line of thinking was so far off point that it wasn't even funny. Seriously, Tenten's like my soulmate. Like my soul sister. I mean, somebody who totally understands me, but not somebody I wanna like, marry and make babies with, you know? Because that would be weird. And awkward. He had to make sure that those distinctions were clearly evident, above anything else. No, I don't know, Hana said, allowing Naruto to continue stumbling his way through philosophy. He rambled when he wasn't sure about how to put something, and it was hilarious. This was the big, bad, scary Jinchuriki, Naruto of the Nine Tails? He seemed more like a regular old 14-year-old boy to her. Why don't you keep explaining it to the poor, old Inuzuka girl from the backwoods? She said with a facetious rural twang to her voice. It's like the chick equivalent of a blood brother. A best friend that's a girl that you treat like family. Naruto struggled to explain before eventually catching on and glaring over at the older girl, his eyes closed in a bitter squint. You're messing with me, aren't you? Hana couldn't even meet his eyes, lest she burst out in laughter. Yeah? Sorry. It's just so easy. She admitted with a few chuckles before a sad smile formed on her face. You kind of remind me of my brother, actually. He was a little bit like you. Loud and a little awkward. He was your age and everything. Naruto felt all kinds of awful now. This was a girl that had lost her brother and was losing more members of her clan, probably even at that moment. Talking about what he still had that she was in danger of losing wasn't something that he should have felt comfortable with. So we've still got to get down into the deep, and soon. Right. Let's go then, Hana said, happy to get off of the saddening topic of her brother. She already decided that the grieving could be saved for when she reunited with her clan and her mother. Maybe she'll let you get all kissy-face with her when you see her again. Naruto shook his head, continuing to lead the way forward on the search for the operatives of the deep. You're seriously missing the mark. Let it go already. As if Tenten would break a guy's jaw first before she let anyone do that. He'd seen it. Of course, it had been their own fault for trying to get handsy and whatnot with a trained kunoichi. Still, despite saying aloud that Tenten could handle herself, it did little to convince him of his own words. God, she would definitely be pissed if she knew that he was thinking that way. XXX, with Tenten the deep, Tenten still had blood on her from running a human being through with a spear. She knew that she did, even if she couldn't necessarily see the red, as dark as it was in most of the deep. How she yearned to be a smartass and ask if she could be taken back for another shower and a new change of clothes again. They weren't going to just kill her now after their little test. If that were to have been the case, they would have just done it while she was still in the arena. Whatever was happening, she was in now. All this just to get close to someone and not kill them? It was a lot of effort. Where are you taking me? Tenten asked as she took note of her surroundings. All of the hallways looked the exact same. All were poorly lit, as though it were intentionally done. She tried as hard as she could to memorize the turns that they were taking so that she could get back to the entrance later, but it was difficult. Between listening to Rinji, keeping her senses open for another surprise test, and all of the other compounding worries she had rattling around in her head, Rinji's damned infuriating smile remained on his face as he effortlessly seemed to lead her around the deep. Orochimaru-sama is always interested in meeting the new people that join our ranks. Ranks? Tenten said, channeling her distaste for her situation into outrage for being recruited into a mystery fighting force. I just came down here for a safe place to live. Rinji scoffed at the assumption that it would be that easy. He apparently didn't think much of the refugees from the topside, even if they had won the right to live and survive down there. And no one lives for free. There's a cost to everything. Money. Goods. But none of those things hold any value if staying here is your aim. Strength and ability is the only currency recognized in this place. And that was the last word between the two of them until they reached an ominous-looking door where Rinji allowed Tenten to walk ahead of him. She stopped as if to ask why he wasn't leading her any farther, but he shook his head and walked away. This is all you. Good luck. You're going to let me in there to speak with him, by myself? Tenten asked suspiciously. Rinji turned around just long enough to let her see his very punchable face one last time. Trust me, there's nothing you could do to him all on your own. Oh, so punchable. But for as much of a jerk as he was, Tenten believed him without a shadow of a doubt. One did not spend a lot of their life listening to the rumors and urban legends of the ninja world without hearing of at least enough of Orochimaru's feats to leave a healthy sense of wariness in regards to potentially interacting with the man. Tenten carefully and quietly reached for the door, silently opening it just enough to slip her body inside and close it back. She felt as if she were trespassing in the lair of a top-of-the-food chain predator, and she wasn't that far off. Despite her trepidation, she couldn't help but marvel at the advanced technology she saw in what had to be a workshop or a laboratory of some sort. There were tables topped with parts and schematics, several layouts of the human body and the known human chakra network. Designs and formulas of all sorts that made her want to stop and look them over to compare or possibly find something that would get her own creative thoughts flowing. She walked over to a table that was overflowing with notes and parts, covered in dust as it seemingly hadn't been touched in quite some time. Her fingertips brushed one of the open scrolls, wiping away a film of dust to better help her see. Interesting, don't you think? Tenten turned around with a start, though there was no one behind her. The smooth, sly voice had come from deeper inside of the workshop. Despite her heart leaping into her throat, she was in no danger. Instead, now she just knew for certain that there was someone else in there, and he did wish to speak with her. The potential of human beings is incredible. With enough will and ingenuity, a simple concept, no matter how far-fetched it seems, can become a reality. With enough creativity, anything in this world can be possible. Tenten followed the voice until she found herself staring at the back of a tall man with long, black hair. As she stood in his presence, she had no doubt that this man was indeed the person that she and her friends had come to find in the first place. Orochimaru-sama? She added as an afterthought. Even if she had no plans of being a real underling of his strength and intellect warranted the show of respect, if nothing else. He turned and made eye contact with her, and Tenten had to fight against herself to keep from taking a step back. A wide grin spread across Orochimaru's ghastly, white face as he appraised the girl before him. There's no need to be afraid or try to keep up any sort of tiresome facade. I know who you are, dear. That was highly improbable. No one knew who Tenten was, because no one had ever cared. She didn't exactly have any sort of reputation, or any defining trait as a shinobi that people would keep an eye on. Nor did she come from any sort of clan pedigree. To say that she was skeptical of the claim of the man before her would not have been a stretch. You do? Yes, Orochimaru said, moving past his machines and other devices that filled the workshop. I am considered a man of science by many. A purveyor of death-dealing tools and techniques by others. I would not do much to live up to such a standard if I were unaware of certain up-and-comers in similar fields, such as yourself. Well, hell then. It was a fair idea. Orochimaru admitted, walking past Tenten, getting behind her without ever seeing him take a step. A henge would have been discovered the moment you made your way inside, so you depended on your own lack of notoriety, or any sort of name value to simply make your way inside, and it worked. This was no good. One of the most dangerous men in the world had her basically at his mercy. So what happens now? Tenten asked, watching Orochimaru check something off on a list he had been holding as he moved to another station. Nothing. Orochimaru said, dismissive of the lengths that Tenten had gone through to try and get into the deep to possibly learn of his whereabouts. Were you expecting me to do something violent? You must have had your reasons for seeking me out, and I doubt that those reasons were devious if you came here alone. On the contrary, I find myself impressed by you, if you can believe that. Tenten stood straight and held her arms sheepishly. I can honestly. Orochimaru stopped and turned around, surprising Tenten at the look of disappointment on his face. There is a difference between humility and low self-esteem, young lady. I am not a fan of either, and people I see true potential in. Never say anything like that again, he warned. She worked her mouth, but no sound came out. Tenten had no idea what to say in regards to just being threatened, none too subtly about her own self-image. Why would you care? Not bothering to turn around to face her again, Orochimaru made himself busy by plying his attention to more of his pending works. A fair question, he said as he did so. My dear, you are not descended from any discernible clan background, the same as myself. And yet you have clawed your way into a significant position in a faction making quite a bit of noise at the moment. I don't have any influence, Orochimaru-sama. Not really. It hadn't quite taken a material form yet. It was still mostly an idea. But even if there was land for it, and even if it was taking shape, she was just a soldier. She worked for Minato, took orders from him, Kushina, Kakashi, Jiraiya, and whoever else had seniority. That was all. But you will, he whispered to her, a grin on his face. For several reasons. Not the least of which would be your ability to innovate. Your ingenuity. You have a beautiful mind, with some of the things you've been able to create, and at such a young age. Orochimaru didn't think the same as her at all. Tenten was looking at the immediate future and her place in things now. She might not have thought that she was important in the present scheme of things, but that would change very quickly once things began to set themselves in motion. Orochimaru could read such things well in advance. If she stayed alive, she would be someone. He just knew it. I do so hate to see unique talent squandered. I take it personally, Orochimaru commented to the astonished girl before changing the subject. But never mind that now. Do you know what my specialty is? I have a particular interest in ninjutsu design and body modification. What would you say yours is? Tenten bit her lips self-consciously, wondering if her focus in creation would seem lame to the powerful scientist before her. I love ninja tools. Weapons, she said before elaborating on her focus in the ninja arts. With the right weapon, the talent to use it properly, and a plan, I believe even someone like me can win against anyone and anything. And by someone like you mean Dash, Orochimaru said, needling her to get her point out. He would not allow her to let it go unsaid. He wanted to hear it. No natural gifts. No unnatural power-up. No Kekkei Genkai. No prodigy's talent for ninjutsu or genjutsu. Tenten continued to explain seamlessly. It's just me, and what's up here. And in here. She punctuated by tapping at her temple and then at the left side of her chest at her heart. Are you jealous of your friend? He is quite powerful from what I've heard, and not just for his age. Tenten frowned at the thought. You're talking about Naruto, aren't you? She asked before shaking her head. No. As strong as having the nine tails inside of him makes Naruto, it brings a lot of problems with it that I don't think anyone else could take without changing, turning into something bitter. That's because his circumstances have never caused him to lose anything that he truly values, Orochimaru said, telling her his opinion on the matter. He is young, and he hasn't seen just how cruel this world of ours can make itself. But enough waxing philosophical and getting to know each other, You came here for a reason, and I am not just a scientist, I am a businessman. What, pray tell, can I do for you today? Tenten inhaled deeply before bringing up the real reason that had brought her there. I need the antidote to your bioweapon. Which one? Orochimaru deadpanned. You're going to have to be a little more specific, my dear. I seem to wind up making a new one whenever I have free time on my hands. The weapon-loving Kunoichi's jaw hung open in astonishment. He did that sort of thing all the time? Was this man insane? Who made biological weapons every time they were bored? The one that killed off the Fuma clan! She cried out. Orochimaru simply continued to stare at her as if to ask if he were supposed to know what she was referring to. It took a concerted effort from Tenten to refrain from palming her forehead. The Uchiha clan bought it? She tried next. A glow of familiarity came to Orochimaru's yellow eyes as his disturbing grin came back in force. Oh yes! That one! I'm rather proud of my work in regards to how that one turned out, he told her. I've come up with nothing more effective for dealing with shinobi without the rigmarole of battle and extended campaigns. Does it have an actual name? Tenten asked, her fear and astonishment giving way to honest curiosity. I've never heard anyone even say it before since it started popping up. Orochimaru truly was proud of the project that had garnered him so much money from the Uchiha clan. The 5 Elements virus, he revealed, chuckling smugly to himself. It's really the most interesting project I remember completing in quite some time. It turns the very chakra running through your system against you. The stronger and more abundant a person's chakra, the lower their chance of survival after coming into contact with it. No wonder it wound up wiping out an entire clan. No one knew that much about it. The most that anyone had been able to discern about it before was that it caused the body to attack itself somehow. It had been frightening enough then, but now Orochimaru's pet virus sounded like an absolute nightmare. A shinobi's chakra was there, everything, more or less. It was what made most of them shinobi in the first place. The amount that you had and what you could do with it were some of the most lauded traits possible. For your own strongest tool to become the reason for your painful death was horrible. The stronger you are, the more likely it is to kill you. Orochimaru was glad to speak to someone who had at least a rudimentary grasp of what he was trying to explain. Exactly. Anyone the virus kills would be those that the user would be wary of, and anyone who survives the duration of the sickness and recovers would likely be someone that they would not hesitate to engage in battle anyway. That is its purpose. How much do you want for an antidote? Tenten blurted out, getting sick at officially hearing for the first time exactly how the bioweapon was supposed to work. Ah, and now we get to the heart of the matter. Orochimaru mused aloud. Well, I'm afraid I've never gotten around to creating an antidote. At that, he could just feel Tenten tense up without ever needing to look at her. A sigh came from the white-skinned shinobi's mouth. I said I never created an antidote. I didn't say that I never made the formula for one. I can sell you that. That was great. It was better than she could have anticipated. That meant that they could make their own and have as many as they needed after a one-time purchase. From a strategic sense, being the ones with the cure for the Uchiha clan's death plague would foster a lot of goodwill with their enemies if it continued to come up. Was that a cold way of looking at it? Perhaps. But it was realistic. Then he dropped the price on her. 600 million ryo. Yua! Tenten squeaked unimpressively. Yes, they had it. But she didn't think she had the authorization to blow that much money on anything, especially since what they had on them was money that Naruto had lifted from the village establishment fund, which was considerably far deeper than a paltry 600 million. Even so, 600 million was 600 million, and it wasn't hers to spend. Why so much? How much did the Uchiha clan pay for the actual virus? About half of that, more or less. Why is the antidote so much more then? Orochimaru shook his head and chuckled amusedly at Tenten's outbursts. My dear, a common combat knife will oftentimes cost less than what it would take to stitch up someone wounded by the very same blade. He reasoned smoothly. There's more money in the cure. It's the business of medicine. And besides, do you really think I would sell the counter to one of my own weapons for cheap? Ninja economics was such a dirty practice. Triple X, meanwhile, with Naruto, as they were led through the woods by the noses of Hana and her Niken, both Naruto and Shino were mentally prepared for a fight. There was no doubt in either of their minds that this would turn violent very quickly, even if they came to the denizens of the deep with an even-handed, peaceful approach. My murder senses are tingling. Kurama suddenly said inside of Naruto's head. Something I really want to kill is getting close. I can feel it. Please stop calling it that, Naruto mentally beseeched his Biju ally. I think I'm going crazy enough as it is without you yipping at me to kill stuff that you don't like. Well, maybe if you humored me and did it just once when I told you to, I wouldn't be on about it so much. No, you just do it more since I caved once before. What? You don't trust me? To act like you have morals? Hell no. Morals are for wimpy humans like you to justify not having the strength to do whatever you want. I'm not having this talk with you again. And weren't we talking about something important? I don't know. I was focused on the murder. Yes, the murder. Because something that Kurama didn't like was getting close enough to them to set him off, and as far as Naruto knew, only one thing made Kurama go on a tangent promoting hapless, wholesale slaughter. Uchiha. Right on cue, Hana's nose twitched, and she brought them all to a stop, growling at the environment around them, her Niken following suit. You've got a lot of nerve trying this crap again. She snarled, managing to keep herself in check despite the sheer numbers of the enemy that she could smell amassing before them. If nothing else, they knew to come in numbers. Naruto counted over a dozen of them himself. If there were more, Hana and Shino would probably know before he ever did. TCH, nerve? Coming from the people that stole what belongs to my clan. Naruto knew that voice. The effort to sound as cool and collected as his older brother, when deep down that was not his personality in the slightest. It was a dead giveaway. Sasuke, go away, he demanded lowly. I don't have time for this right now. Sasuke raised an eyebrow in return. Normally Naruto was spoiling just as heavily as he usually was to fight. You have my clan's property, Sasuke informed him, arms crossed as he stared the Jinchuriki down. And I'm not going to say something like, give it up and we'll let you live. You already know what's going to happen. Naruto extended his hand to Hana. Wordlessly, the young Inuzuka woman handed the bioweapon canister over to Naruto, an audible smack sounding out from the transaction. Naruto held it up in front of him in one hand. Oh, you mean this? He asked, getting a glare out of Sasuke before he held it by both ends and pressed his hands together, the canister apparently disappearing right in front of Sasuke's eyes. Where did it go? Nothing up my sleeve! Sasuke bit back a yell of anger at Naruto's little games. At least he hadn't sealed it away into anything. He hadn't seen any activation of chakra with his Sharingan, or any of the physical signs of Naruto's sealing techniques. He had seen quite a few of them. Whatever he had just done wasn't one of them. Fine. One of Sasuke's supporting Uchiha clan members. We'll just kill your friends and torture it out of you. You were going to kill us anyway. Hana chimed in dryly. I don't see how Naruto playing peekaboo with the canister would have changed that. Shino agreed with a curt nod. Indeed. A female Uchiha member simply shrugged her shoulders in return. It would have been quicker, and less painful. Fortunately, that is not your decision in this instance, Shino said, holding his arms out in his ready stance, his body set to send out insects from every part of his body at a moment's notice. Why? Because we will be fighting back. I hope you are prepared. I don't, Hana rebutted honestly, a sneer marring her attractive features before she launched herself at the nearest enemy to them, one who thought they could actually sneak up on her while their attention had been elsewhere. That particular powder keg hadn't lasted for long before exploding. Sticking together in a 12+on 3 situation would have resulted in a chance for serious casualties on the side with the lesser numbers. Even if they were individually the better of their opposition, Hana didn't know enough about working with Naruto and Shino to manage a feasible method of dealing with this kind of battle. Still, Hana had her Niken, which was 3 different forms of backup for her. Shino had his insects, and Naruto had himself. They split up as the Uchiha darted about, picking their targets and forming up in squads that had been arranged beforehand. They had been prepared to deal with the group because of Sasuke's familiarity with them, and fought as such. This won't take long, one of the attacking Uchiha boasted. Good, 'cause I don't have time for this, Naruto shouted, dodging back and away from 3 Uchiha who had gone for him, thinking they could overwhelm him before he began to tap into the chakra that gave him his epithet. Get out of the way! He formed a cross seal with his fingers and created a single clone that kicked him out of the way and intercepted the Uchiha clan members coming his way. The clone was quickly destroyed, but not before it completed 5 quick hand seals and touched its hands to the ground. In its demise, a puff of smoke concealed a large sealing array on the ground that left the clan members trapped inside of it, unable to escape its confines. What the hell? The real Naruto wasted none of the momentum his clone's shove had given him, pumping all of his force into his legs and sparing no time in leaping right at Sasuke. Subtly pulling a kunai, his attempt to stab Sasuke was stopped by Sasuke's sword, though the impact of the charge knocked the 2 of them deeper into the forest, away from the rest of the battle. As the Uchiha clan remained trapped by Naruto's Fuinjutsu trap, thousands of insects came crawling out of the trees and bushes, down from the dirt, and all around, all coming right for them, locked on with extreme prejudice. Hijitsu Mushidama, Hidden Jutsu, Insect Sphere. Shino said calmly as the insects breached the ceiling perimeter that the Uchiha clan members couldn't escape. For God's sake, where did they all come from? I had them spread out throughout the forest helping us search for the deep. Shino explained, for the benefit of himself alone, as by now the trapped Uchiha clan members were screaming in horror at having the chakra sucked out of them by a mass of insects covering their bodies. I kept them in reserve instead of letting them come back to me, just in case we were attacked. It's always smart to have an ace in the hole. Out of the members of the team, Naruto might have been the strongest, but Shino was the most merciless in battle, by far. It wasn't even a contest. Hana didn't mind dealing with the enemy even though they outnumbered her current party. She had sorely needed a point of stress relief for quite some time. They hadn't done enough fighting for her to get out her aggression and sorrows properly. She and her Nikan had teeth and claws that hadn't gotten enough blood on them to make up for what had happened to Kiba. It was her mistake as the elder sister for not reining him in during his hasty attack against Sasuke, and she would have rather paid for it with her life than his, but that didn't occur. She was alive, he was dead, and those aligned with the clan that orchestrated his death and would see every Inuzuka cast from the lands that were their home were right in front of her. If she failed, they would have her life and the tool they needed to end the ongoing struggle between the Inuzuka and the Uchiha without a fight. She would not allow that to happen. XXX Naruto drove Sasuke back fiercely through the forest over a long distance. The two still more or less attached by the lethal weapons they had pulled on one another. Sasuke wasn't willing to risk relinquishing his guard against Naruto's kunai, and Naruto was certain he would be able to overpower Sasuke and force the tip of the blade through his body. Maddeningly enough, Sasuke's footsteps were fleet and skilled enough to guide them out of the way of any tree trunk they would have crashed into as they moved, no matter how Naruto tried to guide him into one. Their clash sent them flying over the side of a bluff where they kicked each other away and landed on the surface of a river with a pair of large splashes before the water settled, and they stood at a stalemate, drenched. Naruto had dropped his kunai, but Sasuke still stood armed. They stared each other down until Naruto stomped angrily, splashing up water. "Sasuke, you asswipe! Come back later if you want to be a psychopath!" he shouted. "We were following some guys who worked in the deep. Now they probably got away because of you." Sasuke ran a hand up his face and into his wet hair, irritated at the current state of affairs. Fighting him was always such trouble. "I don't see how this is supposed to be my problem." What did he care if Naruto was trying to get into whatever place he was talking about? His only concern was getting the bioweapon back. That was why he had gathered as many forces as he had to attack Naruto's group, because he knew that he would need them. But he hadn't expected Naruto to be down a number from what he had been expecting. "Where's the girl with the weapons?" Sasuke asked, having wondered from the outset of the battle where Tenten had been. At first he'd feared that she was elsewhere waiting for an opportunity to ambush them in turn, but as things progressed he realized that she just wasn't there. "She was definitely with you before, and I can't imagine you trading her off for the Inuzuka girl." Tenten had definitely been with him when he had been fleeing the seaside town that they'd run across them in the first time around. His group had never reported any sort of strange movement, such as the team splitting up and separating. "Don't tell me," Sasuke said, a smirk slowly growing on his face. "You let her get captured by whoever is in charge of this place you're talking about." As Naruto grit his teeth tightly, Sasuke added one last barb. His usual parting shot whenever he spoke to his blonde enemy. "Loser." Naruto's body took on a golden glow as though he were a flickering flame and disappeared. Sasuke's eyes went wide, but he knew what was coming as his Sharingan had been on, and he'd seen him begin to move. Sasuke was able to cover up and turn his body just in time to avoid most of the impact from Naruto's high-speed, Biju-enhanced haymaker. The first time Naruto had ever punched him like that, it made full contact and nearly killed him. He'd gotten better at seeing the signs to know when it was coming, and picking up on Naruto's targeting tendencies to know where he would aim. That along with training his Sharingan to adjust to things he couldn't directly keep up with physically. It also helped that while Naruto could do it on command, he couldn't actually maintain it for long. Sasuke didn't know if that were true or not, but it was a deduction helped along by the fact that he never saw Naruto keep whatever it was on. It was like a shunshin from hell if it was anything. Sasuke pulled himself out of the trench his body had dug into the shore after taking the punch, shaking out his right arm that trembled heavily after absorbing part of the impact from the blow. "TCH. You may have half of the world fooled that you're some kind of force of nature, but I know better. Your mom hits harder than you do," Sasuke taunted as Naruto slid to a stop on the surface of the river. Naruto glared at him, but noticed the involuntary twitching of Sasuke's limb and quickly changed his attitude. Oh yeah? How would you know that? You ran away from her. The reminder of Sasuke's retreat was neither needed nor wanted. He created a quick flurry of hand seals before breathing fire from his mouth. Katan, Ryuka no Jutsu, Fire Release, Dragon Fire Jutsu. Naruto didn't dawdle and immediately moved to get out of Sasuke's line of aim, successfully doing so as Sasuke's attack had missed him by far. But instead of flying off safely, it turned and immediately followed Naruto, advancing on him at a pace he had never seen Sasuke's fireballs move at. This didn't even look like a fireball. It looked like a line of fire burning ever closer to him in the air, no matter how he tried to move to avoid it. With a look back at Sasuke, Naruto could see something hanging between his teeth, a wire. A quick look down at his hands let Naruto see a nearly invisible string wrapped around one of his wrists. He cut himself free just before he would have been immolated. When did he have time to get the wire on me? Naruto thought to himself, breathing heavily and relieved that he was able to realize what had been happening before he had been set ablaze, either from the very beginning before we jumped away from each other, or when I punched him. The former was more likely, but Naruto wouldn't have put the latter past Sasuke with what he knew he was capable of. If anything, it was likely that he placed a genjutsu on Naruto to hide what he was doing. Sasuke of all people knew that genjutsu wasn't exactly the strongest facet of Naruto's game. In his panic to remove the wire from himself, Naruto momentarily lost sight of Sasuke, missing as Sasuke darted across the surface of the river, getting close enough to wage a silent attack. At the last moment, Naruto heard the shifting of Sasuke's sword in his hand. Turning his body, Naruto was able to catch Sasuke's sword between his palms as Sasuke stabbed forward. The blade pierced the armor-padded vest on him, but barely broke the skin underneath before stopping. Naruto's blood stained the sword from the cuts on his hands as Sasuke tried in vain to push the weapon farther into his target. Naruto activated Kurama's chakra just long enough to break Sasuke's sword with a twist of his wrists. Sasuke immediately jumped away and tilted his head out of danger when Naruto threw the broken piece of sword at his face. The small metal object missed and sliced straight through several trees along the side of the river. Sasuke dabbed at a warm, sharp stinging on his face and felt a cut that had opened up on his cheek. The piece of sword had never touched him. Instead, it had only been the wind chakra that Naruto had coated it with when he'd thrown it. Naruto watched the Uchiha discard his now worthless weapon to the side and rushed him directly. Sasuke aimed a kick at his head but found it blocked by a clone that Naruto created as he rushed right past him. After making it past Sasuke, Naruto's clone disengaged away from him just as Naruto turned his body, and the two of them reached out into the air with their hands before pulling toward themselves. Futon, Kazunomuki, Wind Release, Way of the Gale. The water parted, heading in the direction of both Naruto's, while Sasuke hung in the air where he had been caught. He suddenly felt as though his body were being pulled apart by the intensity of the two attractive forces of air. The air was sucked right out of his lungs by the two-sided vacuum that Naruto's jutsu had formed. He couldn't even find enough to yell out, despite the pain. Realizing that Naruto and his clone were sucking everything in, Sasuke opened the weapon's pouch he kept at his hip, letting everything inside fly freely at one of the Narutos. It just so happened to be the real one, who dropped his jutsu after being stabbed and cut with several sharp instruments. The loss of one side of the vacuum caused Sasuke to fly at the source of the other, Naruto's clone. Rage in his bloodshot Sharingan eyes, Sasuke punched through it and dispelled it before getting a small measure of distance from the real Naruto. Damn, Naruto said, pulling a few shuriken out of his shoulder and chest. If he'd have held his breath like everybody else tries to, it would have killed him. He had turned up the intensity of the jutsu too fast in his haste to finally checkmate Sasuke. He usually started it slowly so that people would feel their breath being taken away and would try to hold it, which was the ultimate mistake that wound up doing them in. Holding one's breath during that jutsu only ruptured the lungs and released air inside into the circulatory system. Breathing out was the way to prolong the time that one could last in it. Sasuke took deep gasping breaths, choking down precious oxygen as if it were a non-renewable resource, and he were trying to hoard it all. His swimming vision slowly settled in, but his temper did not. Damn it, this doesn't have anything to do with you. Why are you fighting so hard for a clan that isn't yours? The Inuzuka weren't even friends of his. Because I don't clap for genocide, Naruto responded. It doesn't matter if I'm with them or not. I'm not letting anyone kill off a whole clan. If it was yours, I would do the same thing. Kurama let out a sigh from inside of Naruto at his altruistic attitude. Yes. I would argue with you the entire way, but I know that you still probably would anyway, damn it. You're full of so much shit. Sasuke told him with chuckle, showing just how laughable he found such a statement from someone like him. If the Uchiha clan and the Inuzuka clan switched places just for this, you wouldn't be able to hand that canister back over to them fast enough. Naruto let out a sigh, bag showing under his eyes on his normally exuberant, youthful features. I don't want to kill you guys, Sasuke. I don't want to kill anyone. But I can, I have, and I will again, he said, his solid blue eyes hardening at the prospect of ending his rival's life. Sasuke was losing. He knew he was losing. Naruto had fought a much more inventive fight than Sasuke had expected out of him, and he had the upper hand. Sasuke was hurt far worse than Naruto was. Sasuke didn't have anything in his repertoire that could turn the tide in an instant, and if things kept devolving into a battle of attrition, Sasuke would never be able to win against Naruto for several different reasons. At that moment, several small fireballs flew into the air above the trees, catching both Naruto and Sasuke's attention. Naruto didn't know what that meant, but it clearly meant something to Sasuke from the look in his eyes afterwards. The two stared each other down, with Naruto just waiting for Sasuke to make any sort of move so he could pounce. Neither moved a muscle for the longest time until movement from the nearby trees gave way to Shino and Hana arriving to back Naruto up. Guys. They retreated, Hana reported. She was coated with blood from the battle, and none of it was hers. Her three partners were chasing the retreating enemies away, making it as much of a rout as possible. Even better than that though, Naruto seemed to have put Sasuke through the ringer. I guess you've got this one in a spot where he can't run though. You should surrender, Shino suggested to Sasuke amicably. Why? Because it is 6 against 1, and your clansmen have already chosen to fall back. Sasuke scoffed at the thought of running away with his tail between his legs. There was no way he was letting them leave with something his clan spent good money on. Well, if they wanted the bioweapon so badly, they could have it. He hated to waste it on just 3 people, but it was in their possession. He wasn't going to get it back in a timely fashion, if at all, and he felt like being a sore loser today. Too bad for them. He made 3 hand seals, stopping on the bird's seal, staring right at Naruto as he did it. Release. Naruto heard a loud hiss and felt the release of air pressure from the canister, hidden somewhere on his person. His eyes went wide as Sasuke smirked. It wasn't the victory he wanted, but the enemy wasn't going to get their weapon without their approval at least. Well, have fun with that. With that, he disappeared in a shunshin, leaving behind 3 stunned and terrified shinobi. Naruto quickly fished the canister from where he had kept it stashed away for safety. His breath hitched at the sight of the broken seals all over the object, as well as the open cap that had been airtight beforehand. This was no good for any of them. Now that the seals on it were broken, Naruto could better read them, including the remote array set to activate to a specific trigger. Of course it was a remote-activated object. Who would be the poor schmuck to stand right by it and open it with their hands? He would have kicked himself if there was any way he could do more damage to himself than what the cursed thing inside of the canister would now do to them. Naruto, Shino, and Hana all looked at each other with varying expressions of horror on their faces. The only saving grace was that it was just the 3 of them and Hana's Niken that had been around. Still, Naruto was able to sum up the thought that was clearly being shared between the 3 of them at that particular moment. Fuck. XXX Niji smiled to himself as he saw Hinata positively beaming at his side. He still had something of an enmity with most of the main family of the Hyuga clan, but as Hinata had grown older and taken on more responsibilities as the to-be future leader, he saw a bright spot on the horizon for the branch family. Now older as well, he wore traditional Hyuga robes. A white shirt with loose sleeves, fastened shut on the right shoulder, along with matching pants, a gray apron tied around his waist, and black shinobi sandals. As they traveled on a trail in the lowlands, heading to where Minato had sent word that they would be trying to establish the foundation of the Allied Village plan, Hinata's bright attitude was because of who she expected to see once they made it there. The girl meant to be the person leading the Hyuga clan into the future was growing up to be quite the beautiful lady, with her long, dark blue hair trailing down to her waist. Hinata wore a lavender, sleeveless blouse, tied with a dark purple obi around her waist, as well as a pair of short navy shorts with thigh-high stockings and black high-heeled sandals. She had a significant soft spot for the leader's son, Naruto. Niji could see it, but as the chief bodyguard to the young woman who was also his first cousin, he made it his business to keep that information from going any further until she was bold enough to do so herself, something that could take a while. While Hinata was far less timid than she used to be back when they were young children, she was still a bashful girl at heart. The fact that the person she admired was Naruto didn't make it any easier. It was like being someone who was easily startled, but liked fireworks and artillery. "Remember Hinata-sama?" Niji started to say as they walked, flanked by several other Hyuga clan members. "We are coming for actual business, not just for personal reasons." "I am aware of that, Niji Nizan," Hinata replied, her face turning slightly red at the subtle reference. "That doesn't mean I can't look forward to certain parts of the mission, does it?" Niji let out a chuckle at her shy reply and shook his head. "No, I guess it doesn't." His guard was still up, as they were out in the open in the wilderness, but they were surrounded by their clansmen, some of whom were alternating the job as watchmen for the party. Their Byakugan could be exhausted if it was left on for too long, but it was too useful a scouting tool to leave off when they could be attacked at any moment. They were headed to the location Minato had been scoping out for a possible location of the village as a show of good faith from the Hyuga clan that they were willing to work directly to bring his dream into existence, instead of just sitting back and waiting for something concrete to show before throwing their full support behind it. Namikaze Minato had been a good friend and ally to the Hyuga clan in the past, as had those who worked alongside him. If nothing else, the Hyuga clan understood loyalty and valued it greatly. They also saw the value in combining forces with other skilled organizations and pooling resources. It was a good investment in their future, both as far as the chance of garnering earnings through work went, and for their safety from the constant fighting that took place over business. The fact that they liked the people putting the whole thing together was just a pleasant bonus. Slyly, one of the Hyuga guards slowed his pace enough to move at Niji's speed, leaning over to whisper to the main bodyguard of the party. "Incoming enemies," he said, the veins around his eyes showing his active Byakugan. "Shall we attack them while you protect the heiress?" Sneaking up on the Hyuga clan was quite the difficult task for even the best shinobi. Niji took a moment to think about it before turning on his own Byakugan. They were being followed, true, and their stalkers were staying away for the time being to try and find a vulnerable moment to catch them unaware. If they know enough about us, they know that engaging up close is likely the worst thing for them. They'll try to attack from a distance. And that was a bad thing for most of them. Other than Niji and Hinata, no one knew any of the Hyuga clan's more prized techniques that would allow them defense from distance attacks. Those were for main branch members only. Niji knew them because of his own talent that allowed him to pick it all up in passing. He didn't want to put any of his fellow branch family members at risk by sending them out to attack an enemy that was prepared for them. Not at a time when things looked to be moving in a positive direction for them. He wanted them to live to see times of change. All of them. But Hinata was going to be the instigator of most of that change, and putting her life on the line was not an option. It was to be avoided whenever humanly possible. It was the reason he was her closest bodyguard after all. Still, the element of surprise was now on their side, and in some cases it was best to take things into your own hands. After all, it was safer to attack than to defend, was it not? "No," Niji eventually told his clansmen. "I will engage the enemy alone. Simply stay close to the heiress, and do not stop walking until I begin fighting," he ordered before quickly addressing Hinata. "Hinata-sama, I will return soon. I'm afraid there is something I must take care of." Hinata frowned, but knew by now that if Niji had decided on something of this nature, it would be difficult to stop him, especially if the alternative left the chance of putting her in danger. "Please be careful." Niji nodded and simply turned around, standing in the middle of the road with his eyes closed, waiting. After almost a minute of waiting, he turned his Byakugan on and saw both his comrades moving away and the people stalking them from farther back stopped and waiting. It brought a smirk to his face, as though he couldn't see them. "If you've come to do us harm," Niji started to say, speaking loudly enough to be clearly heard throughout the deep valley road, "you should turn around and leave. Or you could try to attack me before I attack you. If I make the first move, this won't last very long." No one moved. Niji could see them camouflaged in the rock of the valley cliffs that covered the road and counted them out in his head. Their numbers would have been a problem if they had attacked his contingent, as the time it took to dispatch them as they came along to him would have given them a chance to hurt the others. But since he was alone, he didn't particularly care about 10 shinobi, especially as they attacked him all at once. It was the worst possible thing they could have done, but how could they have known that? Even if they had somehow procured knowledge of the Hyuga clan's top-tier secret techniques, who would have figured a lowly branch family member to know any of them? Thank you for making this easy, Niji said, his Byakugan blaring to life as they leapt at him from above on all sides. I wish that I could do the same for you. Unfortunately, you are all in range of my divination. Niji took his stance, and as they all fell into his area of influence, no one escaped the wrath of his merciless hands. 2 strikes landed, then 4, then 16, the pace and ferocity of his blows increasing with every interval he counted to in his head. 32, then 64, and that was where it ended, with everyone that received the attack on the ground, barely moving, if at all. Hakai Kanijuhachi Sho, 8 trigrams 128 palms. Niji said, exhaling deeply as he stood up out of his finishing stance, his long sleeves draping back down his arms. The Hyuga clan is extremely accustomed to fighting against greater numbers. Still, you may have had a chance, if your opponent had been almost anyone but me. Niji's attention was drawn to the only kunoichi he could see that was strong enough to actually crawl. Now that he had a moment to check them all, he could find no clan markings or any way to determine just who these people were. Well, that was what talking was for, wasn't it? Niji walked over to the kunoichi just as she reached the cliff wall and suddenly turned, throwing a kunai at his head. Niji tilted his head out of the way and swatted the weapon aside safely, moving faster than she could react to and placing his index and middle fingers directly on her forehead as she reached inside of her shirt, likely to go for another weapon. You shouldn't do that. Frozen solid by the threat of having her brains turned into pudding inside of her skull, her body went lax. They had been defeated soundly, by one Hyuga clan branch member. It was enough to get a laugh out of her. The old man in charge of her clan had never said anything about the Hyuga clan's glorified servant class having someone so talented amongst them. Well, the others would know for the next time. And there would be a next time, even if she and her cohorts wouldn't be there for it. This is just the beginning. The mortally injured kunoichi said quietly, smiling despite her grim predicament. She opened her shirt to reveal explosive tags attached to her, burning down at the same rate her life seemed dwindling. You have no idea! Niji's eyes went wide. His Byakugan had been on. How was it that he couldn't see them there? Boom, XXX, Northwestern Mountain Range, Sarutobi Clan Archives. The Sarutobi clan was willing to sell anyone the chance to hunt their vast libraries for any bit of knowledge they were wise enough to seek out and diligent enough to find for themselves. Yet there were some that warranted watching when they were allowed on their learning grounds. This particular one required keen observation from the clan leader Sarutobi Hiruzen himself. It was not often that the name Shimura Danzo came up, but whenever it did, things rarely went well for any events surrounding its utterance. Most people had forgotten the name of the man, and the clan he belonged to. The battlefield had not been kind to them, as their numbers had dwindled after open war with others for years. Danzo himself was evidence of that, with his crippled body and his missing eye that he kept constantly concealed beneath bandages. Nowadays, they weren't the type to garner a lot of attention through their work, and thus were not as well known. But if you were to see one and find a way to identify them, it was wise to be extremely cautious. Danzo had arrived and paid for a day of study. Nothing more. He seemed to seek out nothing that would have borne watching out for, as far as his future aims went. It was merely some old history. He read as though it were for leisure instead of for any sort of research purposes, but this was perhaps the most unlikely thing feasible. Paying for access to the Sarutobi clan's archives for even a day was too expensive to be done for relaxation. It wasn't exactly a vacation spot, even if guests staying for longer than a day were presented with rooms and could request meals. The old man said nothing the entire time unless it was necessary, and then just as inconspicuously as he arrived, he informed Hiruzen that he was leaving. It wasn't until he was escorting Danzo to the edge of their realm that he even bothered to say anything. Even living on this mountain, I'm certain that a man in your position is aware of what's happening in the world at large. You'll have to be a tad more specific, I'm afraid, Hiruzen said with a small smile as he pulled a pipe from his scholar's robes. We are aware of many things. It is partially our clan's business to obtain information after all. What were you speaking of in general? There used to be rumblings of a man trying to bring together a diverse set of clans and roving shinobi together to form a settlement of all things, Danzo specified, his single eye looking over at Hiruzen speculatively. These are no longer rumblings. This is coming to pass. I believe it to be a step forward. A step forward to what, exactly? Progress? A better way? Something to shake the elemental nations out of the languid cycle of death and suffering that it is now. Danzo scoffed at the thought that this was progress. It was insanity, for so many reasons. Do you really believe that this is for the best, Sarutobi? I did not take you to be a fool. The Sarutobi clan was known as arguably the most well-educated in the lands, in all facets, and amongst them, Hiruzen was meant to be the wisest. You know what this could do to clans that rely on the way things are to make a living. Not all of them are large enough to sustain themselves in the aftermath the way the Senju and Uchiha are. A culture of slaughter and war was not Sarutobi Hiruzen's ideal. It was tiresome. He had lived a long life and had seen nothing but battle. They had texts and tomes full of rich history, art, sciences, and yet every ounce of information anyone had ever come to purchase the chance to find and see for themselves had been for nothing but killing. Every note taken, every word copied had been meant to improve one's chances in battle. It was the most valued thing there was, and it had been for centuries. It was a practice that left him weary, and his clan shared his sentiments entirely. We're cannibalizing ourselves, Shimura-san. Slowly but surely, Hiruzen said. Even if this venture fails, I would rather our way of life perish as a result of us trying something different that could make things better than see it perish by our complacency. Shinobi are meant to endure, Danzo stated coldly. If the way things stand are not to the benefit of your survival, I would say you have no place in the world of ninja. They are also meant to adapt and adjust. Hiruzen counted smoothly with a drag from his pipe. Personally, I would suggest you take stock of your methods and do such. You will not be able to stop progress, no matter how much you may wish to. But clinging to the past that had made him and his clan what they were was what Danzo's mission for survival was. He would clutch and cling to it, and would be as bitter about it as he needed to. I refuse to call something that will lead to the end of us all as progress, he said as he departed. Mark my words. If this village comes to pass, more than half of our world will burn. Hiruzen paid him no mind, and waited until the man was long gone before heaving a heavy sigh. And I am certain that you will do your best to ensure it is our half that does, because he would be on the side that would at least try to bring people together. Whether it failed or not wasn't the point. He spent the night going over what Danzo had been there to read, finding nothing other than lore and recorded clan interaction throughout the years, good and bad, alliances, conflicts, feuds, all of it. Nothing on their mannerisms or anything that would let an enemy of certain groups gain an advantage over them in battle, but still, it did not give him an easy, peaceful feeling whatsoever. They were in the days of a dying system. The era of old was coming to an end. This was something that Hiruzen had been staring in the face for a long time. The only thing that was left to determine would be if the era they were in went out with a whimper, a bang, or a slow and destructive burnout that would scorch anything that would come after it. XXX, the Deep, Orochimaru's private study. Orochimaru had a smile on his face that he couldn't get rid of, even long after Tenten had left to reconnect with her traveling party that she had left outside. So often, his interactions with Shinobi were less than pleasant, to say the least. Not this girl. She had been respectful, and understood that despite his primary focus on the sciences of the ninja world, he could have torn her apart within minutes, if even that. Despite the fact that she had clearly been afraid of him and distasteful of what she had seen of his personal stronghold, she had been wise enough to show him no hostility. Clearly, she had been a smart girl that knew where she stood amongst the monsters of their world. Are you finished sorting away our new guests, Rinji? Orochimaru asked when he felt the presence of one of the few people allowed in his domicile without the need to be cleared first. I hope they find their living conditions to their liking. My organization cannot run without them. Rinji smirked at his employer before bowing. Yes, Orochimaru-sama, he responded respectfully. I feel that I have to ask, was it really wise to let that girl just leave? I was escorting her out when she realized what the people we don't recruit for your forces are used for. Their conditions were as wonderful as they dreamed they would be on the surface. The only thing they were asked was that they simply come to the labs when they were asked, and only when they were asked. None of them cared about what went on in the labs, as they weren't asked to do anything other than live in peace. Tenten realized as they walked away from the briefing of the new guests that they weren't allowed to just live there. There was a price, just like there was for her supposed living there, only they didn't have to fight to the death to gain passage. No, eventually they were likely going to die. Die as some kind of test subject for one of Orochimaru's modifications, or live and then become one of his assistants. By that time, Tenten had all of her weapons back on her person and seemed to come close to actually mounting an attack before she realized where she was and just what her circumstances were. She thought better of it and bit her tongue until she was let out at the main entrance and escorted out of the shantytown where she was free to go about her own business. "Do you really think it's better for them up here than it is down there?" Rinji eventually asked her before she left for good. "You saw these people. They have nowhere to go. No chance. Yes, they may die down with us, but they're dead if they stay up here for too long as well. They've given up. At least in the deep they have a purpose before they move on." The girl thought that life had more value than it did. Yes, it was valuable, but it was not priceless. Not in the least. The way the shinobi lived made that abundantly clear. They were being given a service of comfort with the chance that they might have to pay with their lives at some point. Some didn't even pay that. They were given power, and for no cost but to work for Orochimaru out in the field. Orochimaru merely chuckled at what he heard from his trusted underling. "Yes, many things about this place vex her, but she will do nothing to us with the level she's at now. Besides, I told her when we spoke earlier that I do so hate to see unique talent squandered. If a change is indeed coming, it would do well for me to establish some sort of connection, don't you think so?" Orochimaru could do whatever he liked, because he was a staple of the society that he lived in, the one that bore him. A product of the cruelty and practicality that categorized the ninja world that adapted and thrived enough to carve out his own place in it as a prominent figure. But if those days were coming to an end, if a day was coming where his callous practices of furthering the limits of human potential at all costs would no longer be looked at as necessary to gain the weapons to crush one's enemies, it would probably be best to have someone in what would be the trendsetter for the new regime that thought well enough of him to keep him from becoming an enemy. If only to buy himself some time to find a new way of continuing his practices. Orochimaru wouldn't let a small thing like being perceived as a monster in human flesh keep him from grasping at the dream he so feverishly sought. Which was why he threw in a few samples of the antidote/vaccine, both as a show of good faith and to show that he had indeed come up with one that would work on his own bioweapon. "Yes," Orochimaru drawled. "Call it an investment in the future. XXX, with Naruto, Ta no Kuni, after the signal for the retreat had gone up, none of the Uchiha clan members had dawdled about, even to set traps to slow them down. They had simply run away. It made sense, as Sasuke had probably informed the rest of his allies that he had released the bioweapon. Naruto and his cohorts hadn't tried to pursue them, instead the fight had for the most part been sucked out of them by their circumstances. "Well, I don't know about you guys, but I'm super pissed off right now," he said, sitting on a moss-covered rock a few miles away from the river. Finding Tenten had gone on hold, as they weren't even sure that finding her would have been the safest thing for her with them the way that they were. Hana let out a nervous laugh with little humor behind it. "I'm more afraid than angry." Chino simply stood in silence, not giving his opinion one way or the other, but his body language spoke of some sort of agitation, if nothing else. "What do we do now?" A good question. What were they to do? Go home, get comfortable, and quarantine themselves until they eventually died. They only had a handful of days until they were afflicted to the point where it began to affect them physically. Travel would not be a good option for them then. They probably wouldn't be able. Hana's bandage-covered broken nose wrinkled as a scent she knew of came to her notice, not very far away. "Huh! Oh wow!" Naruto barely needed to be told, as he could hear movement coming their way and stood up from his rock, prepared to intercept whatever it was. Fortunately, it wasn't a hostile presence. Also fortunately, it was who they had been looking for. Unfortunately, they were all afflicted. Tenten landed from where she'd been traveling in the trees, a smile on her face as she stood up from her bent-kneed crouch, dressed again in her normal attire. "Hey guys," she greeted as she started to walk over. "You're never gonna believe the kind of day I had to dash. Tenten, stay back!" Naruto snapped at her with his mouth covered, stopping the surprised girl dead in her tracks before she could reach them. "Don't get any closer! You can't get sick too." Sick? They were sick? No, it couldn't be. "You've got to be kidding," Tenten said, ignoring Naruto's frantic hand movements entirely. Her face was stony and serious. "You've all got it?" she asked, getting 3 nods from her friends and their temporary ally. "How? How in the world did you manage to do that?" Naruto turned away from Tenten, glaring in the direction that he knew the person responsible had run off in. "Because Sasuke's a dick." "I agree," Shino added. "Why, you may ask?" Because he triggered the seals on the canister to open on all three of us. We of course breathed in. Hana noticed Tenten continuing to walk over to them. You really should stay away, she warned, gesturing to her Nikan that she had keeping their distance as well. She didn't know if dogs could catch the virus as well, but she didn't want to take the chance, no matter how much she wanted a comforting hug from her partners. There's no use in you winding up like us. Shaking her head, Tenten advanced over and laid a hand on Hana's shoulder. Don't worry about it. I got immunized while I was in the deep. Orochimaru-sama wouldn't take no for an answer. He gave it to me for free after I bought the formula for the cure. At least there was that. Tenten wouldn't wind up catching the nasty illness like the rest of them had. Better yet, they had gotten a bit of what they'd set out to find. It wasn't something that they could distribute immediately, but it was a start. Wait. You talked to the guy who came up with this crap? Naruto asked, wondering just what he had missed while he'd been fretting about how Tenten had been doing by herself in a dangerous place. He's down there? She nodded. Whoa. How'd that go? What's it like down there anyway? Tenten remembered the fight to the death, the cadre of shinobi loyal to Orochimaru after receiving his experimental techniques and body modifications. The people that she never saw again after they had all headed down there. She didn't even want to think about what had happened, or could be happening to them. If she told Naruto, he might have done something hasty. Something that they didn't have the time to get into. The deep and all of its ills would be there for another day. Time was of the essence now. Terrifying, she summarized. I don't want to talk about what it's like down there right now. And the creepiest thing was, she was certain that Orochimaru liked her. Look you guys, if you're sick, we've got to handle this as fast as we can. With that, she pulled out 2 syringes that she'd kept in her supplies. She hadn't planned or expected to have to pull them out so soon, but this was what they were for, more or less. Her solemn reminder brought the rest of them all back to the most pressing matter, the fact that they were all infected with killer bioweapon, and Tenten only had 2 cures. 2 cures for 3 infected. Hana was shaken up at facing the fate that she and her clansmen had fought so hard to avoid. Now it was set upon her. How long will it take us to die? She asked. It wasn't a topic that Tenten wanted to bring up, but if one of them wasn't going to be fixed, they deserved to know about their chances. A lot of what constituted the virus had just been speculation until she'd heard it right from Orochimaru's mouth, as few wanted to risk their health studying the bodies of those who died from it. Most people don't last longer than 2 weeks, Tenten said, arming her friends with perhaps the only weapon she could for the time being, knowledge. The more chakra you have, the longer it's supposed to take, but the more certain it is that you will die if nothing's done for you. Whoever was left infected was going to suffer. It was going to be unpleasant and painful. They all knew it. There was nothing that could be done for them at all without an antidote handy. Pain relief drugs did nothing to subdue the agony that came with the symptoms. Orochimaru had been very blunt in his description of his beloved plague. The man was exceedingly proud at what he had managed to create. Naruto looked at his comrades and took in their expressions. Hana looked positively petrified, while a faint buzzing hum seemed to be emanating from Shino. Tenten kept shooting looks between the 2 antidotes in her hand and the 3 people before her that were infected. He knew what she wanted to do. She wanted to just give the cure to Naruto and Shino. They were her friends, the ones she knew. The ones she would want to survive if she were forced to make the choice. But it didn't feel right to let it happen that way. This was Naruto's team, and it was his responsibility to Hana to get her back to her clan with a way to ensure their survival. He had been the one to volunteer them, after all. Well, that makes this easy then, Naruto said with a sigh of acceptance. Use what we've got on Shino and Hana. I'll go without until we can have someone make more. Tenten immediately wanted to hit him. She never wanted to do that, but she really felt like it right then. This wasn't the time to succumb to the hero's complex she knew he had. It was about survival. Naruto, this isn't like the flu or something. If it goes for too long, even if we can get the antidote to you in time to save you, you might never be the same again. It's awful. You've seen it. We've all seen it. But it wasn't just him trying to be brave. He honestly figured that with what they knew, his going without was the best option for them. I don't see what other choice we have here. Either I stick it out for as long as possible, or someone else does, and you just said that it takes longer for people with more chakra. Either I'm the one that goes without, and maybe I die, or someone else goes without and they definitely die. Now give Hana and Shino the antidote. Yes, the virus might have been more lethal to those who had more chakra, but that was based against a normal person as a study. It killed shinobi. It was just that simple. There were only a handful that had ever survived it, and Shino and Hana definitely had more chakra than the average shinobi. They would die and die significantly quicker than Naruto would if they weren't treated. I hate you, you know that? She told Naruto for prompting her to make such a decision. I really, really hate you sometimes. You can hate me all you want to. Naruto responded, letting the untrue statements slide right off of him. He knew better. She was just scared. He was too. Just give them the goddamn antidote while you do it. Tenten's fist tightened in her free hand. If she had been holding the antidotes in that hand, they would have shattered in her grip. Eventually, though, she threw them over to Shino and Hana, as instructed. Inject them into your necks. Hana spared Naruto a grateful smile, and immediately did as she was told, feeling a sense of relief as the injection went into her body. Shino didn't do so at first, debating on how he could convince Naruto to instead take the shot, but after studying Naruto's face after he realized the insect user was stalling, Shino realized that there would be no talking him out of it without an actual fight. Begrudgingly, Shino shot his syringe into his own neck. He wasn't happy about it, but was more reserved with his emotions than others. Tenten was not, but she wanted to be productive. Complaining and bitching Naruto out the entire time they traveled to meet up with Minato would do them no good, no matter how much she wanted to yell his ear off. She would make sure he'd be getting it later though, whether he wound up listening or not. As they all wordlessly traveled, Naruto tried to break the awkward silence that had fallen between them due to his mortality staring them all in the face. Heh, well, on the bright side, at least Mom and Dad can't kick my ass for this after they hear about it, or else they'll catch it too. Chapter 19, Down with the Sickness. Tenten wasn't certain what fear looked like when it came to Shino. After all, the young man never made any sound of the sort, and no one could ever see his face. Even so, if ever there was a moment where she figured Shino would be afraid, much like she herself was, it would be when he was standing in front of both Uzumaki Kushina and Namikaze Minato to tell them that their son was posted up out of the town they were holed up in for the safety of the people who lived inside. If he was, he didn't show it, because the words rolled right off of his tongue. Why, you ask? Because it was safer that way for the time being. Thankfully, he was still willing to speak, even as Tenten wisely stood out of Kushina's reach. Yes, she loved Naruto to death, but Kushina really loved Naruto to death. The red-headed mother could be touchy to say the least when it came to Naruto, which was appropriate because he was her firstborn child. Hopefully she wouldn't blame them for what happened. Whenever Shino got it out of his mouth, he did have that roundabout manner of speaking that took forever to get to the point. Kushina and Minato looked at each other with varying levels of confusion on their faces as they heard the even-tempered Aburame out. Shino, Minato said, articulating words that Kushina felt she wouldn't be able to make without babbling. Why is it safer for Naruto to be out of town right now? Why, you ask? Because Naruto-san is currently infected with the Uchiha clan's bioweapon. Shino elaborated, ignoring the sound of a dying cat that Kushina made as her mouth fell wide open. If he were to come into contact with others, there is a chance he could infect them. Minato wasn't much better off. They didn't see him lose his composure often. The man was as collected as they came, but when he was being told something of this magnitude about his son, even he reacted strongly. What? How? Is there an actual outbreak somewhere? Tenten shook Shino's shoulder and whispered in his ear. Hey, try and break it a bit more gently, huh? Shino looked at her and nodded before turning back to Naruto's parents. No, there is no outbreak. It was merely a desperation ploy by our enemy to escape us. Naruto is the only one we know of currently infected. Tenten palmed her forehead. That wasn't exactly her idea of breaking it gently. Then again, if she wanted it done any better, she probably should have done it herself. Shino wasn't exactly a people person. I think I'm gonna throw up, Kushina said, her skin ashen and pale at the thought. Where is he? He's not far away. Tenten jumped in hurriedly before Shino could do any more damage. But that's just the bad news. She cringed after realizing that she was trying to put a silver lining on this particular dark cloud. I bought the formula for the antidote. All we have to do is get the ingredients and find an apothecary to make it. Minato held his hand out as Tenten handed him the scroll that Orochimaru had given her, containing everything that needed to be gathered and how it needed to be prepared to become a viable cure. Well, that's no good. Kushina grimaced, not wanting to hear any more bad news today. What is it now? I have no idea what any of these things are, the blonde leader admitted grimly, scratching at his wild hair, thoroughly at a loss. I don't think anyone other than a doctor or some kind of medic would know much of what to make of this, and we don't know any. The town they were in was nice, but the medical staff there left much to be desired. The best they had was a friendly town physician, but the best he could really do on his own was stitch up bad gashes and set bones. Their clan connections didn't have any high-level medics either. Battlefield medicine was the best that most of them were capable of. Inuzuka Hana is some kind of medic Tenten happily pointed out quickly, hoping this could all be worked out swiftly. A human medic, Minato specified, remembering what he was told of the girl that had gone on this dangerous assignment with Naruto, Shino, and Tenten. From what I know, this Hana girl specializes in veterinary medicine more than anything else. Poisons and other apothecary makes were not focused on animal companions very often. She had some experience in them, yes, but physical healing was the primary focus of her training. They needed someone else with different medical training, the kind of disposed to creating remedies, to make better heads or tails of what they needed to find and where they could get it. X, meanwhile, with Naruto for once, Naruto was at a loss for how to deal with a particular opponent. The reason being, you couldn't exactly punch a disease in the face to get rid of it. There wasn't a jutsu that would magically cleanse him of the illness. It wasn't a poison. It was a life form inside of his body with the sole purpose of destroying him through his chakra. Fortunately, there was a lot of it to go through and taint. Unfortunately, the longer it took, the more it would hurt by the time the end came. Sitting in a tree outside of the nearby village with a rebreather in his mouth for safety, Naruto winced at the mere act of flexing his fingers into a fist. It had started modestly enough a day or so ago, and then he had taken it as the grind of their hurried travel wearing on his body a bit. But it never went away. Even then, he felt sore for no reason, all over. Dying in a battle didn't scare him. At least, not as much as dying without so much as a fight. Being poisoned, or dying from an illness left nothing up to him. It wasn't the sort of enemy he could rage against and overpower or outfox. Was this how it was going to end? No grand battle? Never getting to prove just who and what he really was to the world? He wasn't even going to get the chance to see what would become of the whole village thing? I haven't even gotten sick in forever, and now I'm gonna get killed by the sniffles? Naruto asked himself. That's lame. Come to think of it, he hadn't gotten sick since Kurama had been sealed inside of him. Apparently it was because of the qualities of Kurama's chakra that reinforced Naruto's immune system and improved his natural ability to heal granted by his clan's powerful life force. Kurama, is this something you could get rid of if you had enough time? The blonde Uzumaki asked his Biju partner. Boy, what in the hell makes you think I'm able to do something that precise? Kurama replied inside of Naruto's head. He could mentally see Kurama batting his tails in irritation inside of the cage representing the seal within him. You would be better off asking me to try and to pluck a nest's worth of ants from the ground than do anything like that. Naruto figured as much. If Kurama could get the bioweapon out of his system, he would have done it by now. Even so, the gigantic fox seemed angrier at the question than he normally was. You heal me all the time, and I don't remember ever getting sick since we've been stuck like this. I just want to know what's going on. That's because I normally just zap it out with the chakra I always have circulating inside of you. You monkeys have simple enough body structures where all of your guts are close to your chakra pathways. Even so, that didn't still explain much for Naruto, as his body structure had never seemed to matter before. Everything had been fixed previously. What's the difference this time? It's in your chakra. It's not your organs or any other part of your system, it's your chakra itself. Whatever this is, it's meant to survive better and stronger forms of chakra somehow. I can't just burn whatever this is out of you, because it's infecting what I would use to do it in the first place. Naruto grumbled to himself until something with what Kurama said managed to click with him. When you say that, does it mean that you're sick too? He asked, waiting for and getting no answer from the massive fox inside of him. It was eerie. Kurama was never at a loss for words. You can get sick? Kurama said nothing at first before sighing and letting his thoughts be known. You humans like to think that we Biju are mere forces of nature, and that is true. But we are living things. We're mortal. Killable. It's just far more difficult to do it to us than it is to do to you. Biju were made of chakra, the very blend of energies that living beings survived off of. The seal on Naruto's body automatically mixed their chakra together to a controlled degree. When Naruto's chakra was infected, Kurama's was as well. So not only was Kurama going to die with him when this all finally ended, he was going to die painfully. Even if Naruto got him out of the seal at this point, he would still have the disease. Naruto opened his mouth to speak, only for a guttural growl to cut him off. I swear to God, you had better not apologize. Apologize? To hell with that. Blah, no. Naruto responded distastefully. I was gonna say, we'll fix it. Somehow. How exactly are we going to do that? Kurama was skeptical to say the least. Naruto shrugged, as if Kurama could actually tell that he'd done so. I dunno. When I said we, I didn't mean you and me. I'm pretty sure there are actual smart people working on this right now. That actually makes me feel somewhat better about our chances. Thanks. Anytime. Naruto said before letting out a yawn. You know, dying like this is boring. Can't even hang out around anybody. You want to play a game while we wait for somebody to come get us? What game? How about I spy? I'll start. I spy with my little eye, something brown. Come on, we're in the woods, Kurama. What's brown and everywhere in the woods? How the hell would I know? I'm colorblind. Great. XXX. Even with a new place to learn about and get her bearings in, Tenten couldn't really focus herself on taking in her new surroundings. They were in a nice enough place with friendly people, and yes, it seemed quaint and safe, but she found it difficult to take it all in. Her best friend was waiting all alone outside of the village, slowly dying. But there wasn't anything that she herself could do. She didn't know much about saving lives. All of her creations were meant to assist in some way with taking life. So unless Naruto wanted something pointy to stab himself with to put himself out of his misery, or an explosive so that he could go out with a bang, his help would have to come from somewhere else. How much time did he even have? Most people lasted 2 weeks at most. What did that mean for Naruto with his chakra reserves? How much more time did that give him? Tenten's thoughts on the matter were disrupted by a hurried set of loud footsteps tapping on the paved road behind her. A smile came to her face, knowing that it was Kanako before she even turned her head to look. Kanako was young, so her footsteps were loud and clumsy. It was cute just how easy it was to hear her coming. She stopped and stumbled forward when Kanako ran right into the back of her legs, not expecting the older girl to stop. Ow. Tenten picked Kanako up off of the ground and set her back on her feet. The 3-year-old didn't even bother dusting herself off. Most other instances of interaction with Kanako would lead one to ask how much she could have possibly been related to Naruto. But then things like that happened and it was easier for people to see. Even after hitting the ground, she didn't miss a beat, grabbing onto Tenten's hand with both of her tiny ones. You're back. You're back. Kanako exclaimed, jumping up and down energetically. I don't like it when you all leave me alone. Tenten fought the urge to pick Kanako up and give her a gigantic hug. Naruto was her real flesh and blood brother, but she had been around more than enough that Kanako had gotten very attached to her as well. She wasn't sure how she felt about Shino, since Shino was very quiet and kept to himself for the most part, but she was certain that Kanako liked him too. Sorry, Kana, Tenten told her. I don't think we'll be doing any more missions that'll be sending us away from your mom and dad for a while. With how disastrous things had gone on this last one, even if Naruto survived, there was a good chance his parents would keep a watchful eye on him for quite some time afterwards. And for the time being, there was no chance he was going anywhere. His condition would only get worse over time. Kanako immediately frowned despite the apparent good news, as if she could feel Tenten's mood without needing to see it on her face or be told about it. I want to go see him. Where's my brother? If Naruto had come back, the first thing he would have done would have been to report to Minato and Kushina. Then he would have immediately gone to her. That was what Tenten had expected, but it definitely hadn't been what she'd wanted to hear. You can't see Naruto right now, Kanako, Tenten told her, stooping down to her level as close as she could to look the little girl in the face. It's a little too dangerous to go near him right now. He's kind of sick, and we don't want you to get it too. Sick? Naruto didn't get sick. Kanako knew, as there had been times when she'd been sick and everyone taking care of her had gone to lengths to keep from picking up whatever bug she happened to have. Naruto never did. He would climb into bed right with her to give her something to hold on to, comforting her all while she was coughing and sniffling, and nothing had ever happened to him before. Kanako was an empathetic child who adored her family. Her face twisted into what Tenten recognized as deep concern, causing the older girl to set her hands on Kanako's shoulders to try and assuage her. "Hey, he'll be okay. Don't worry," she said. "You don't think a little something like being sick would hurt Naruto, do you?" Of course not. That made perfect sense as far as Kanako was concerned. Naruto was the strongest, other than their mom and dad. If she got sick and then got better, he would do it in way less time than she ever did. Agreeing with Tenten's point, Kanako shook her head. A few more words passed between them as Tenten took Kanako back to the place where her parents were staying. Tenten satisfied Kanako's childlike curiosity on the life that older ninjas led and just what they had been doing for a few days, skillfully avoiding answering her questions properly in the process, and then sent her off to play with a pat on the backside. Just as soon as Kanako was out of sight, Tenten let out a sigh and let her wooden smile drop. That had been tough. How could she convince Kanako that Naruto would be okay when she couldn't honestly say if she thought he would herself? They needed someone with experience making drugs and other medical creations. A full-blown medic wasn't necessary, but it wouldn't have hurt. XXX, Central High no Kuni, Uchiha clan headquarters. Sasuke's stony countenance belied the fire that rested inside of his stomach after receiving a verbal dressing down from his father. Uchiha Fugaku was none too pleased at the clan's ace-in-the-hole bioweapon being used on 3 riffraff shinobi. He had given his son one assignment: oversee a transport. It shouldn't have been difficult. And yet, the package had never reached its intended destination. That canister was supposed to be opened deep within the heart of the Inuzuka clan's defenses. Fugaku told his youngest son. His stony expression did nothing to hide the look of disappointment radiating from his eyes. Countless Uchiha clan lives would have been preserved. Now we'll have to suffer through a costly campaign to get what we need. Sasuke all but squirmed under his father's gaze. It was just a reminder that he wasn't seen in the same light as Itachi. He'd taken assignment after assignment to try and curry as much respect as he could, but no matter what he did, he couldn't get it from the one person that really mattered to him, the head of the clan. It was either do what I did, or fight 3 against 1 and lose it anyway, Sasuke said through gritted teeth. One of them was Uzumaki and another was an Inuzuka. I couldn't have escaped. It left a deep, throbbing pain to say such a thing aloud. He didn't fail. He didn't lose. Sasuke had an inflated sense of his own abilities, but realized when he was facing quite the steep challenge. With Naruto's enhanced speed and Hana's Nika able to follow his scent easily, there was no chance that he could get away when the two of them were on him at once. The entire mission had been a series of unfortunate occurrences. Between the Inuzuka clan ambush that led to the bioweapon being lost in the first place, to running into Uzumaki Kushina of all people and her pain-in-the-ass son soon thereafter while trying to retrieve it. Sasuke would have liked to see anyone come out on top and get everything they wanted out of that satiation. Fugaku paused upon hearing what or whom Sasuke had to contend with on the battlefield. By Uzumaki, do you mean the boy? And Sasuke opened the bioweapon canister on him? Well, at least that will be one problem solved to see that abomination wiped out. At least something useful came from this. He didn't say it, but Sasuke could tell that he had just been dismissed. The teenage Uchiha swallowed his anger until he left Fugaku's office. He planned on walking what he felt was a safe distance away to vent, and anyone who came across him in the mansion halls were wise to steer clear of him. He made it all the way outside into the garden near the center of the compound before something interrupted his threatening march. Whoa, careful kid. You might set something on fire if you glare any harder. Sasuke's attention rounded onto the carefree figure of Obito, leaning against the railing of a bridge that spanned a pond. The last thing he wanted to hear was some sort of smart-ass remark from a member of the clan that Sasuke didn't think took their aims and future desires to heart. Don't speak to me, Sasuke demanded as he stomped past. There was nothing he had to say to someone like him. For someone as talented as Obito was to not have a higher place in the clan hierarchy than he did, it smacked of nothing more than laziness, of disenchantment, of something along those lines. There was no passion there for being a shinobi. Nothing held Obito back except for Obito himself. It made Sasuke sick to think about something like that ever happening to him. The day he didn't care about excelling and standing head and shoulders above everyone else in his line of work, he hoped there was someone around to take his head off of his shoulders for him. Obito just grinned at Sasuke despite the scorn he was clearly receiving from his younger family member. Come on now. Want to talk about what's got you so pissed? I've been told I'm an excellent conversationalist. Sasuke tried to ignore him as he walked away, but Obito had a gift when it came to getting one's attention. Did Big Daddy Fugaki yell at you? It wasn't the right thing to do for several reasons, but at that moment, Sasuke just wanted Obito to shut up. Walking away to make that happen was an option, but there was also the problem with him needing to vent his anger. Reaching into Obito's throat and ripping out his vocal cords just killed two birds with one stone. The speed behind his turn and lunge was impressive. It would have been impossible for a normal person to follow, especially if they weren't prepared for the move. To Sasuke's surprise, he missed, even though he could have sworn he'd made contact. Obito didn't dodge so much as he walked through Sasuke's attack hand. It made Sasuke turn his Sharingan on to make sure that he hadn't been caught in a genjutsu. Just how did he do that? It wasn't speed. It couldn't have been. No need to be so hostile, little cousin, Obito said, standing right behind Sasuke, his back to him, hands nonchalantly in his pockets. That temper of yours, that need to prove something to everyone around you, it makes you weak. Easy to manipulate, he said as he walked away. You should work on that. Wait, Sasuke said, regaining his composure and now wanting answers. I hit you. I know I did. Is that why they call you the Ghost? It had been years since he'd earned that title, but Obito's more unique abilities were still a mystery to the entirety of the clan. Obito spared a moment to stop and look back over his shoulder for a second with a grin. No, they call me the Ghost because the best part of me died a long time ago, but I just keep on hanging around. And nobody knows why. X, you know Kuni, Fu enjoyed how peaceful the village she and Anko found was. It was quaint, quiet, with lots of friendly people. What she didn't like was that there wasn't really anywhere she could go that was high up. She was a fan of high places, but the best that she could do around that area was hang around up in the trees. There was nowhere to stare out over the landscape and just think. That made her grumpier than she already was. Even the little kids that enjoyed her energy and company weren't enough to cheer her up, and she took to brooding on her own instead of doing it around them and bringing them all down as well. Eventually, Anko came searching for her, and found her close to where she'd last heard that Fu was. There you are, partner! The purple-haired freelancer chirped heartily at the sight of the Jinchuriki. I've been looking all over. I thought you, why are you sulking? Fu let out a desperate sigh and turned her orange eyes onto Anko. Naruto is sick with the Uchiha clan's illness, and Fu can't do anything to help him, she said. He's all by himself at the edge of town, and no one can go to him. She really wanted to go to him. Naruto was one of her favorite people. Other than being the only other person she had ever met that could relate to being a Jinchuriki, he was always good to her, and trusted in her despite her attempt to kill him when they first met. Anko knew that Fu liked Naruto, and often teased her about possibly having a crush on him, though all of it went over Fu's head. The poor girl had no sense of romance or lust whatsoever, thus making anything she felt for Naruto completely platonic. Until that changed, Anko might as well have tried to tease a brick wall. Still, she liked the golden-haired dunderhead, and learning of his current predicament probably made her quite upset. You want to go punch some bad guys in the face for money? Anko offered. It might make you feel better. It always makes me feel better. Fu doesn't want to punch anything unless it's Uchiha Sasuke. Anko knew that tone. She used to speak in that tone about Kakuzu. It didn't sound right coming from someone as peppy as Fu. Look, no one's as much of an advocate for vengeance-based murder as I am, but there's a time and a place for everything, she said, trying to talk the girl down. Right now, as far as I know, he's still up and moving around, so the best thing anyone can do is act like business is as usual. He isn't dead yet, and it would probably piss him off if everyone acted like he was. Fu knew Anko was right. It didn't make everything okay, but it did make her realize that acting down in the dumps wouldn't do anyone any favors. Hey, check that out. Anko directed Fu's attention to a contingent of what was clearly shinobi entering the village. A closer glance as they walked nearer let the two women see that they were of the Hyuga clan, one of the organizations aligned with Minato in his bid to form a permanent union between different powers of the ninja world. Well, that was a good thing at least. A sign that things were moving along in the right direction. Maybe all of this hard work would begin to bear physical fruit in the near future. The thought of that did put a smile on Fu's face, until she realized something. Her face scrunched up in thought, which Anko noticed in her younger charge. Hey, what's the matter? Nothing was the matter, particularly. At least it might not have been. They're here earlier than Minato-sama expected, aren't they? Actually, they were. By a few days. And once they got closer they seemed as if they had been traveling quickly from their somewhat bedraggled state. What the hell happened to them? Anko asked, moving in to try and get some answers. Triple X, with Naruto, one thing that Naruto hated more than almost anything else was inaction. Sitting back and waiting was the worst thing in the world to him. He didn't mind failing. He didn't mind hardship. Just as long as those things could come while he was actually trying to do something about it. The thing about his current affliction was that there wasn't much he could do about it without more knowledge. Then again, medicine had never particularly been his forte, to say the very least. Naruto sighed from where he rested underneath the shade of one of the forest's many trees. Who would have thought that having a big chakra fox in your belly to burn all of the bad stuff out of you for years could turn out to be a bad thing? All he got in response was a grunt or snort from Kurama. Dying is boring. A soft gasp in response to his statement elicited his attention. His surroundings were too quiet for him to miss it. Jumping up to his feet, he quickly scanned the area to try and find the source of the noise. There was no other sign of anything in the forest other than him, which was wrong. Naruto's gut told him that he had definitely heard something, and it was still there. All right, Naruto said, trying to appeal to whatever it was sense of reason. Come on out and I won't tear this whole place down to make you. I'll do it too. I'm really bored. It took another few moments, but eventually a young woman with long, dark blue hair showed herself. Her eyes were a telltale sign of the clan she affiliated herself with, and her timidity was something that helped Naruto pick up on just who she was. Hinata! He exclaimed as he scrambled to his feet. The girl shivered a little at Naruto's shouting of her name, but she smiled and came out more from her hiding place. Wow! What are you doing all the way out here? I didn't think your clan would let you go anywhere by yourself. I'm not by myself, Hinata said with a light laugh as she started to move closer. Father sent me with Niji-Mizan and a group of our shinobi to do our part to help get your Minato-sama's village together. I didn't think you would be here. She had hoped that he would be, but Naruto was normally dispatched on some kind of mission whenever Minato had met with Hayashi, or whenever she and Hayashi had gone to meet with Minato somewhere. She was ecstatic to see him. Her smile lit up the forest, and put one on Naruto's face, behind the rebreather, which was very difficult to tell because it covered a lot of his face. Stupid breathing mask. Wait, he was wearing that for a good reason. And Hinata was getting a little too close, standing just outside of 10 feet to him. Wait, Naruto suddenly said, getting the girl to stop in her tracks. Did someone tell you where I was? He asked tentatively. Hinata didn't know why that mattered, frowning as she answered. No, she said softly. But with your chakra, you're very easy to find. At that, she turned her Byakugan on for emphasis, only to tilt her head slightly in curiosity as she tried to figure out the particulars of what she was seeing when it came to his chakra network. There's something different about it though. Tainted. You shouldn't get any closer, Naruto told her with a deep sigh in his voice. And here he thought he'd be able to forget about all of that for a short while to talk with her. But he couldn't just not tell her about it. There's a reason my chakra looks off. I got hit with the Uchiha clan's bioweapon. He could see the realization mount on her face before he even finished his admission. I'm sick with it right now. Thankfully, when the poor girl fainted, she fell into a nearby bush instead of on the hard ground. Naruto debated what to do for the longest time before tugging at the modified rebreather on his face. Well, I can't really infect anyone if I'm not breathing into the air. And this thing is keeping me from doing that. It would probably be alright to take her somewhere in the village to lie down. He'd even avoid most everyone else until he could find a place. To the town it was. Hopefully no one asked him why he was wearing the stupid thing and just chalked it up to being a ninja thing. XXX Minato sat in his temporary office at the inn he and his followers and family were living out of for the time being. The Hyuga clan had arrived on time and safe, for the most part at least. Niji had a few burns on his left arm, but it was nothing a tough young man like him couldn't just ignore. He was troubled because of what he had been told, that the Hyuga clan had been targeted en route to the village. It hadn't been an attack from bandits, but an organized fighting force, willing to sacrifice themselves to prevent as many Hyuga as possible from meeting up with him. The Hyuga clan that had traveled to meet with Minato had no valuables on them. Their attackers had no intention to kidnap them. And in the end, the last one alive had left a cryptic warning that it was just the beginning. What was just the beginning? He didn't want to think about it, but he had to. If it was the beginning of a force directly opposing what he was trying to do to bring people together, yes, he had to think about it. He had to be concerned. He had to figure out everything he needed to stop it before the damage was done. "Thank you for telling me all of this, Niji," Minato told the young Hyuga, setting his hands on his shoulders in what he hoped was a comforting gesture. He had just led his clan out of a sticky situation and had been wounded because of it. "We'll find out the reason behind all of this and deal with it." Niji accepted the famed speedster's words, though begrudgingly. He wasn't happy with the way they were in the dark. Things didn't feel safe, and at the moment no one had the answers to make things better. "I wish I had more information that could help with learning who they were. But they didn't use any specific techniques that could be attributed to any particular organization, nor did I see any markings signifying who they were." Not that it would have mattered after the one kunoichi he'd left alive to try and interrogate blew herself up in close proximity to the other bodies. There wasn't much left to check over, were it not for a timely special defensive technique allowed to be taught to Niji as the guardian of the main branch's heiress. There wouldn't have been much left of him either. "There's not much more we can do about it now. I'm just grateful that no one was killed and you weren't hurt any worse than you were," Minato said, trying to put some kind of positive spin on things. "I promise I'll handle this matter personally when the time comes." This wouldn't be the only time that something like this would occur if there really were active parties out to try and destroy them for attempting to align. Though it would have been best to prevent a next time from happening, that wasn't realistic in this case. The next time would have to be the last though, before bad things started happening. The atmosphere of the room shifted when the door slowly moved open and Naruto backed into the room with Hinata unresponsive in his arms. "Hey, old man, where are the Hyugas supposed to be staying?" "Because dash." Naruto stopped completely after turning around and noticing Hinata's older cousin, whose job it was to be as overprotective of her as possible. As time had passed and Niji's anger had decreased, he had really taken to his role as her bodyguard, which made the current situation possibly dangerous. "Niji, before you say anything, she passed out all on her own. It's not my fault." Niji stared at Naruto with a piercing gaze before relenting with a sigh and walking over. "Give her here," he told him as he took Hinata off of his hands. "What are we going to do with you, Hinata-sama?" he said under his breath. He hadn't really blamed Naruto for the fainting spell from the outset. He of all people knew that she could be rather frail about certain things. Minato walked up to Naruto with a stony expression on his face that almost made his son take a few steps back. Blue stared into blue before Minato threw his arms firmly around Naruto and pulled him into a hug. Naruto's eyes widened in shock before narrowing, realizing the likely reason why Minato was hugging him as though this were the end. "Old man, if you don't let go of me right now, I'm gonna knee you in the junk," he warned. He was not about to sit through a pity parade featuring all of his friends and loved ones. "I'm not dead yet." Minato let go of Naruto and smiled with a laugh. That was the prickly brat he'd spent the last few years trying to connect with. It was clear that Naruto wasn't going to let what was happening beat him down. "Well, we're all perfectly reasonable, intelligent people. I'm sure we can figure out that list and get you what you need." It was at this time, Niji felt the need to bring up the elephant in the room. In other words, the rebreather on Naruto's face. "What on earth are you wearing that ridiculous thing for?" Niji asked, an eyebrow raised at the sight of the apparatus covering his would-be comrade's nose and mouth. Naruto didn't know quite how to put it mildly. He would have been just as bad at breaking the news to his parents as Shino had been. "So I don't infect the whole town with a deadly virus. Maybe even worse." Niji took a step back that likely wouldn't have been noticed had he not been in front of Shinobi. "And by deadly virus you mean dash? Uchiha clan bioweapon thingy?" "Of course it is." Fainting wasn't Niji's thing. Not like Hinata's. But he could now see why she might have been overwhelmed enough to do so. Hearing that Naruto was walking around with a dangerous sickness, even if there were measures taken to protect others from having it pass on to others through the air, was still a bit much to think about. Wait. Naruto having the virus meant that he was technically dying, didn't it? Now Hinata fainting made much more sense. X, meanwhile, elsewhere in the village, as Shino wanted the village to try and get his bearings, just in case something dangerous happened, he happened upon Inuzuka Hana sitting alone, looking quite despondent. He didn't understand why. While yes, things could have been better, the negative circumstances didn't particularly affect her. Naruto was the one who was sick, and she didn't know him well enough that anything happening to him should have bothered her. Come to think of it, why did he care that Hana seemed to care? How she was feeling most certainly didn't affect him. Either way, he stood by where she was sitting and attempted to make conversation. "You are troubled by something," he said, getting her attention. "This does not make sense." The key word was attempted. Hana spared Shino a glance before letting out a huff and turning her gaze away once again. "A kid no older than my brother is basically walking on death row, and it's because I wasn't strong enough to handle this on my own. Our clan wasn't strong enough to handle this on our own. It was a professional assignment for accepted compensation." Hana let out a bit of laughter that didn't quite convince anyone who heard it that it was real. "Payment. We didn't exactly discuss any kind of payment before we set out," she explained softly. While the tribes that comprised her clan did have some money, they didn't exactly have a lot that would have been valued material-wise by much of the rest of the world. They tended to live off of the land. "So I basically got him killed while he was still working pro bono. Naruto and his team would most certainly be getting compensated now. Hana would make sure of it. Whatever she had to give them to make up for what they'd done. Even if she had to fight her mother for the right to give that order herself. It was wartime, yes, but a service had been done for them, and once the cure was produced for the Uchiha clan's horrid bioweapon, after hearing all of that, Shino had run fresh out of empathy. "I understand. When you put it that way, one can see why you would have a problem with your conscience," he said, nodding to himself. "Carry on then." Once again, at least he made the attempt to converse and ease Hana's mind. The fact that it wasn't a very good attempt should not have mattered. Fortunately, Tenten was nearby for the tail end of it, and saved everyone from more of the same. "Shino, you aren't exactly doing very well on the positive reinforcement front today," Tenten pointed out, tugging at the hood of Shino's jacket. "Maybe you should stop trying to cheer her up?" "It is not my strong suit, I will admit," Shino said, readjusting his clothes appropriately after being previously jostled. "And we love you for it, but it's good you realize it," Tenten told him with a smile before turning her attention to Hana, whom she sat down beside. "You shouldn't beat yourself up about what happened," she said. "He was the one that made the choice, and if he hadn't given the last antidote to you, he'd be feeling just like you are right now." It was awful. It made her upset to think about. But it was the truth. After he made his decision, Naruto probably would have physically fought against any attempt to give him the last remaining antidote instead of Hana. It was also of little comfort to Hana. "That still doesn't mean anything. This whole thing was my clan's problem. It was our responsibility to handle, and I just went and passed the buck to you all. It's terrible." Tenten gave her a friendly jab in the arm to try and cheer her up, cringing at how unlikely it was to work and how much of a tomboy that probably made her seem like. "Naruto was the one that took on the mission for all of us, so in his mind it was his responsibility to deal with the consequences. You were technically our employer, and this whole thing was meant to benefit you. He probably figured that he couldn't just let you die. It makes sense to me." Shino chimed in from the sidelines. "Why, you may ask?" "In my observations, Naruto-san does have something of a hero's complex. A lot of good that did him, and all of you," Hana said. "Poor kid should have never gotten involved." Her three Niken whined pitifully along with her words. It was one thing to accept responsibility for one's role in unfortunate events. Dwelling over them rarely did anything helpful, and it could be exceptionally annoying for certain people related to the person dealing with the most misfortune. Tenten turned her entire body to Hana, an unsmiling expression on her face, most of her compassion set aside. "Look, I can't even imagine how bad the last week and a half of your life has been, but my oldest friend is hanging around somewhere all alone with a modded piece of old gear on his face to keep him from breathing on someone and killing them while he's slowly dying," she said. "Now you can sit here and be down in the dumps, but I'm going to go find him and figure out where we're going to go and what we're going to do to fix this." With that said, she got back up and began to leave to do just that, when Hana's voice called out and stopped her. "Wait." Tenten paused and allowed Hana the time to say what she wanted to say, despite how prickly their talk had just gotten moments ago. Yeah. She did feel a little bad about it, but she had meant it. Hana stared straight ahead, reaching out to stroke the head of one of her dogs. "I'm going to stay for a little while before I head back home. With the bioweapon gone, things should be safe for a bit. If you need something, I'll be somewhere around here." Another body around a possibly vulnerable place was always appreciated, but Tenten figured that Hana would have wanted to get back to her clan as soon as possible, with it being at war and all. "You don't have to do that. I would like to find a way to negotiate the bioweapon antidote once you all get it," the Inuzuka girl admitted for the sake of honesty. Besides, I want to see what Naruto of the Nine Tails is capable of. I've seen him fight. Now I want to know if he really could survive something like this. And if she would really need to feel any guiltier about his death one day soon. Tenten grinned and scoffed. Please. As if something like being infected with a deadly disease could kill Naruto. Tons of people wish it was that easy. I wonder if it's wrong that I could probably count as one of those people at times. That dull, indifferent voice. The somewhat mean-spirited, possible life-threatening underlying statement that she knew him to give regularly, even to small, impressionable children. Tenten turned with a gigantic grin on her face at the sight of gravity-defying silver hair and a lazy one-eyed gaze sitting just above an ever-present face mask. Kakashi-sensei. Kakashi droned in his usual unenthusiastic manner, waving his hands and wiggling his fingers. So, what's this I hear about a deadly infection? Sounds absolutely thunderful, he said with blank sarcasm. It also makes me wonder why I didn't take those vultures eating that black cat on the side of the road on the way up here as a sign to stay away from this place. That was morbid, sensei. Sorry. He didn't sound sorry at all, not that Tenten expected any sincerity out of him. Hello, Shino. You look well, Kakashi added after the fact, noticing the bug user's presence. Shino nodded, thoroughly satisfied that Kakashi remembered to acknowledge him. At least one person could usually tell when he was around. Anyway, you were saying, Kakashi said, getting the conversation back on track. Who's infected with what now? XXX Naruto didn't want to compare a child to a dog, especially when that child was his younger sister, but the look Kanako was giving him from her place in their mother's lap across the room made him think of a dog that you told to sit, but knew it would do the exact opposite the moment you took your eyes off of it. Kushina was holding on to her, but he knew that the second her grip lapsed and they weren't paying close enough attention, Kanako would squirm down and run over to him to sit in his lap. Not that he had any problem with that. As a matter of fact, he had been the one who had spoiled her into getting used to sitting with him like that. But he was holding back a dangerous illness with a rebreather that filtered every last breath he took. While it probably was safe for her to come over and sit with him, and he knew she had missed him, he didn't want to take the chance that she would get sick with what he had. So, Kushina said, wondering exactly what she could say after spending most of the day trying to cope with what was happening with her son. It took a lot to be in a room with him without bursting into hysterical tears and doing something embarrassing. Is that mask a permanent thing now, or what? God, I hope not, Naruto said with a sigh, his shoulders slumping. It was uncomfortable sitting there and spending time with the woman who brought him into the world. Look, Mom, can you not treat this whole thing like this? Like what? Like this, Naruto said, as though that explained everything. He silently motioned to his ears to prompt Kushina to cover Kanako's, much to her chagrin. I might be dying, but I'm not dead yet. Don't act like there's a clock on my chest counting down how much time I've got left. I'm gonna fix this. I'll fix it for everyone. Kushina thought for some time about what she could say in return. It wasn't that she didn't have hope. But statistics were statistics, and they were added on to the fact that the virus was more fatal to people with greater amounts of chakra. When the adversary was something tangible that they could touch, speak with, she never doubted that anything could be done. It was something Naruto had inherited from her. But this was nothing like that. Still, he was her son. If he told her he was going to do something, and said it with as much belief as he just had, she would believe that he could. You'd better, Kushina asserted as a method of saving face. I swear the day my baby gets killed by a bug, you know I raised my kids to be tougher than that. You sure as hell didn't get the ability to take a punch from Minato. Why do you think he got so fast? She joked, letting Kanako pry her hands off of her ears. You baby Kanako, Naruto pointed out with a grin that was covered by the rebreather on his face. It's not fair. I got all the hard knocks. She's getting pampered. That's because you baby Kanako, Kushina corrected in return. Any spoiled habits she ends up getting are because of you. Don't blame me. Besides, yours is the unfortunate nature of being the firstborn. New parents make all of their mistakes with the oldest kid. That's what makes the ones that come after easier. You'll see one day. All of that aside, I think I did a fine job with you regardless. She finished with a haughty sniff. A fine job? Naruto repeated, playing into his mother's own ego-driven comments on her own parenting. Nah, that's not a good enough word to describe what created all of this. I'm awesome, right, Kana? Uh-huh, Kanako said, her eyes shining brightly as she wiggled in the seat that was Kushina's lap. It was clear that she'd agreed on the chance that Naruto would okay her coming over to him instead, as she was clearly poised to run over and jump right at him the moment she was given the okay. Naruto rolled his eyes before nodding to Kushina and opening his arms for Kanako. The second Kushina let go, the little girl bolted across the room and jumped right into her older brother, knowing full well he would catch her. Naruto let out a little grunt of pain at the little missile plowing into him, and trying but failing to wrap her arms around him. He made sure to wrap his arms around her extra tight to make up for it. Not that he had plans to die or anything, but if he had to, he definitely wouldn't have wanted to do it until Kanako was much older and could process it better. He liked to think he'd done a good job of keeping his sister from being mentally scarred thus far, and he wanted to keep it that way for as long as possible. MRP Kanako muttered into Naruto's chest. Naruto squinted down at her, trying to decipher what she'd said, as it didn't look like she would be letting go any time soon. What did you say? Stop going away. The tiny redhead mumbled pitifully. I don't like it when you're not around. It was a terrible thing to think about, but Kanako might have been lonelier than Naruto had been when he was her age. Even if most of the other kids stayed away from him, he still had Karen picking on him. And while that had been awful, at least it had been some sort of constant company. Now, they kept moving so much that any friends Kanako might have made that were her age in any one place had probably forgotten or would forget her. He was really her only constant acquaintance, and he was 10 years older than her, which wasn't good for a child's development. When you're a little bit bigger, I can take you with me. Which was the only promise he could make, and it wasn't one he was entirely certain he could keep. Kushina slipped out of the room while Naruto was sitting with Kanako. They would be fine, but once Naruto truly started showing symptoms of his illness, she would be scared to death of what was happening to him. Hopefully, things wouldn't get that far. As she wandered the halls of the inn where they were staying, she thought about how well Naruto had taken the changes to his life. From having Kurama sealed inside of him and being ostracized from the Uzumaki clan, to meeting his father for the first time ever and settling into that as his new normality, to getting a younger sister. And then there was his being used as something of a bargaining point for Minato's unified village plan. He'd taken it all in stride, adapted to every bit of it, even taken to some of those things like a duck to water, no matter how sudden some of those changes and situations had occurred. No matter how much they had completely turned his life upside down. She peeked into the suite that contained Minato's office and the room that they shared, finding Tenten inside with Kakashi, seemingly conferring with Minato over some matter or another. Hey, what's going on? She asked. The door hadn't been shut, so it wasn't a private matter. Hello, Kakashi. Kushina-sama. Kakashi greeted warmly and respectfully. I was just repeating what I said to Tenten earlier. She dragged me all the way here so I could tell Minato-sama, so it's good you're here to listen in too. Speaking of Tenten, the girl seemed like she could barely hold still. She wasn't quite smiling, but she seemed to be happy or excited about something, likely whatever Kakashi had yet to tell the rest of them. There's a world-renowned medic and expert on poisons who may be able to help you find everything you need to fix what ails Naruto. The mask-wearing shinobi said, immediately gaining every ounce of Kushina and Minato's undivided attention. True, none of us can make heads or tails of Orochimaru's list of ingredients, but I can guarantee you that she can. I just wish I knew more medics by name. Kakashi was visibly uncomfortable in his body language for whatever reason when it came to the topic of medics that he knew. The only one who seemed to understand just why was Minato, but for Kakashi's sake and for the sake of moving the conversation along, Tenten and Kushina let it go. They squared it away for later though. Don't we all? Kushina said. They really didn't know enough people that were good at medical ninjutsu, or medicine in general. Unfortunately, most of them tended to be affiliated with Senju Tsunade, who was the best of them. But you're saying that this person is top shelf? Oh, absolutely, Kakashi said, holding up his right hand as though he were swearing on something. And fortunately, she's not hard to find. At that, Tenten couldn't contain herself any longer. Yes. Finally, no wild goose chases or dangerous searches. It's always secret this, or hidden that. For once, it was just a matter of going to a place that one of them already knew about and could find already. She could help out her best friend, and the path to doing so was a straight line. That was a change of pace. Even if the path wound up being blocked by some kind of brick wall, the fact that things could be straightforward for once was encouraging. A thoughtful look came over Minato's face before he addressed Tenten, I think I should see to this myself, he said, much to everyone's surprise. Minato's work had been centered around networking to get the village off the ground. It's only right. Minato-sama, are you sure? Tenten asked. This is kind of a boots-on-the-ground thing, even if it does involve Naruto. The would-be leader waved off his young subordinates' concerns on the matter, duly noted though they were. I've been delegating responsibilities a bit too much for my tastes lately. I think I can spare the time to go and look for a cure to help my son, Minato said wryly. Besides, after the last mission, you were all supposed to get a vacation, remember? Obviously, that didn't happen. He would be damned if he would just sit back and let someone else handle searching for the person who could get him what he needed to fix his only son. It might not have been fitting for the leader of a powerful organization to get personally involved in matters involving one of his soldiers, even if that soldier was his own child, but he wasn't the leader of anything yet. He could still take things personally. Time was of the essence. So who better to put on the matter than the fastest man in the world? Kushina nodded at Minato's points. Naruto was their son. There was nothing keeping them from stepping in and doing what they could themselves instead of leaving it to his friends instead. She would have never forgiven herself if she let things go that way and Naruto died as a result. Sure, she said in agreement with her husband before looking over at Tenten. That means you lot are holding down the fort until we get back, so to speak. Somewhat befuddled by Kushina's declaration of we, Kakashi pointed to himself to clarify whether or not that included him. Wait, you don't mean I'm going, do you? Who are you leaving in charge then? Not that he wanted babysitting duties all over again, and not that he thought the kids were incapable of keeping things under control by themselves. After all, he'd had a hand in training them, back when they were a pack of miserable, squishy runts. But the Hyuga clan had sent representatives and shinobi to assist with anything Minato needed in the meantime. Minato. And while Hinata and Niji were on good enough terms to listen to others aside from him, the rest were older, more wizened, cynical, and would be difficult to say the least. Naruto, being Minato's son and a symbol of his movement's power, might have been able to get some loyalty out of them in a pinch, but he would be sidelined soon, and it would be best that as few people as possible knew that he was sick, even allies. Kakashi also doubted the Hyuga clan would be too eager to take any kind of direction from any clanless ninja that wasn't getting marching orders directly from Minato's mouth. Taking orders from a ninja-different clan, Shino for instance, was entirely out of the question. Even if he was old and experienced enough to have their respect, which he wasn't. Anko, Minato said absently before stopping and thinking about his statement. A shiver went down his spine at just how unwise that idea would have probably been. Anko was perfectly fine to consider for most any kind of work in the field. If it was anything more delicate and political, not so much. Never mind. I'll send a message and get someone else to come. It better be someone the Hyuga clan will respect, Minato-sama. Kakashi added as an aside. I'm just saying. I know. Kakashi meant well, but if Minato needed to be told that, he had no business being in the position that he was in. That shouldn't be a problem. The problem is, will this person actually be able to help? Kakashi crossed his arms and leaned against the edge of a desk. You shouldn't ask that, because she definitely can. The question is, will she help? From what I've heard, she can be rather difficult. I guess we'll see when we get there. And where is there exactly? Soraku. Tenten's jaw dropped. The city? The gigantic city? The only real city that existed in the desert? She had never been, and didn't know anyone that had, but she had heard about it. Honestly, she just wanted to see it. Honest-to-goodness cities were a rarity. Most countries didn't even have them. Minato's blue eyes hardened with resolve. All right then. We have a destination. Let's prepare and head out. I can get us into Kaze no Kuni in a flash, but I don't have a marker down in Soraku. We'll still have to head the rest of the way on foot. Great. Kushina rubbed her hands together in anticipation as she headed deeper into the suite to gather her things for the journey. Sunburn City, ahoy. Let's do this. That's the spirit, Minato said, following after his wife. Chapter 20, On Your Guard. Between the steadily growing pain ravaging his body and the rebreather he kept on his face to protect the people around him, sleep was very hard to come by for Naruto. Despite his best efforts to convince his friends otherwise, they had convinced him to spend most of his time in bed to save his strength until he got better. It irked him, because he wanted to do all that he could before his body wouldn't let him any longer. The door to his room opened up to allow Tenten inside. She greeted him with a smile that didn't reach her brown eyes as she came closer to him to check on how he was doing today. "How are you feeling today, tough guy?" she asked, sitting down at the edge of the bed with a cup of water in her hand. Naruto let out a sigh as he sat up and winced at the pain that came from an action that simple. "I feel like I got my ass kicked. But no one's even touched me." He was trying to hide just how bad it was, but Tenten could see exactly what he was talking about. If anything, he was downplaying it. "God, I wish we had a real medic. I can't tell how bad off you are," she said before holding up the cup of water and a handful of tablets. "All right. Time for the magic feel-good pills. Can you hold the glass, or do you want me to do it?" "I don't want you to do it," Naruto said. He reached for the glass and took it out of Tenten's hand, but his grip was so weak that it slipped from his grasp. Fortunately, Tenten had seen it coming and caught it before it could drop and spill. "Give me the stuff," he said as he begrudgingly worked the rebreather off of his face and held his breath. "It's not a big deal if you need help," Tenten said, letting Naruto drop the pills into his mouth before helping him drink. "We're friends. I want to help you." Naruto swallowed the bitter medicine and made a disgusted face before putting his rebreather back on. "It's not that. Remember, if I breathe on you, you could catch what I've got. That's the whole reason I'm wearing this thing, to filter out the nasty crap inside of me," he said, flicking the apparatus on his face. "I don't even want painkillers right now." "Why? If I get used to them now, won't they work less over time? I kind of want to save them for when I really need them." Tenten gave Naruto a dull look as if to question his intelligence and or sanity. "Naruto, you can't sleep now. I'd say that's needing them." "Fine. Whatever, Dr. Feelgood," Naruto groused, lying back in his bed, pouting up to the ceiling. "So what's going on out there?" Tenten smiled and leaned over, happy to have a more positive topic to talk about. "Well, the Hyuga clan sent some good people to gauge this area's ability to hold a ninja settlement. The Byakugan was incredibly useful in several regards when it came to that. It's pretty exciting actually, to see them make up mock plans and everything." "Ah, man." Naruto's eyes reflected a true sense of stir-crazy, only enhanced further by a desire to be a part of his father's dream moving forward. "I wish I could see." "I'll make sure you get a look, don't worry," Tenten said, patting him on the thigh consolingly before her smile slightly broke. "Yeah, it's just that you can tell that they're getting a little antsy too. That's not good. Between the attack they had to deal with on the way here, and Minato-sama leaving with Kakashi-sensei and your mom, there's no one here that they would accept as being in charge. You would almost be good enough, but you're down and out for the time being. We don't want them to know that you're sick with the bioweapon." Because Naruto was leverage on Minato's side of things. He already knew. It was yet another reason that he had to survive. They were in a precarious enough position politically as it was. Without the threat of Jinchuriki Naruto hanging over the head of their potential enemies, bad things would happen. "You know, I could get up and go around for a little while," Naruto offered. "Make the rounds. That sort of thing." Tenten took a moment to think about it before deciding that it couldn't hurt. Naruto was still in good spirits, so he couldn't have been that unhealthy. "All right, let's see if you can stand up." Throwing one of his arms over her shoulder, Tenten moved slowly so as not to cause him undue harm as they tried to test how stable Naruto would be on his feet. Gritting his teeth, Naruto managed to pull himself out of bed with Tenten's help. His nerves screamed at him that movement on that level was a bad idea. Perhaps him being bedridden had been for the best after all? "This sucks," the weapon user felt for her friend. Naruto was the embodiment of activity, movement, health, and vitality. Watching him struggle to remain upright even with her help made her sick inside. She wanted to give him a gigantic hug and tell him everything was going to be okay, mostly for her own sake mentally, but that was too touchy-feely for her tastes. Also, hugging him would probably hurt him like hell. After taking a moment to get steady on his feet, Naruto slowly distanced himself from Tenten to stand entirely under his own power. He felt like an infant learning how to stand up and walk for the first time again, only instead of a lack of motor skills, his problem was how much it hurt to just move. He was still able to though, which was a good thing. "See? Told you," Naruto said, trying to show some bravado, despite his circumstances. "Until I start randomly bleeding from my pores and pus comes out of my eyes, I'm not a dead man walking yet." Tenten gave a polite golf clap. "Also, EW. Can you not remind me of the last symptoms?" Thinking of seeing you like that makes me want to dash. Cry. More like throw up. She responded before pausing as a thought came to her. It took that much effort just to get Naruto to stand up and walk on his own, so by that line of thought. Can you dress yourself? From the look on Naruto's face, he hadn't thought about it either. God, I hope so. Or else I'm gonna have to ask you to do something really awkward. XXX, Kaze no Kuni, Kushina was an island girl. She was born on the gorgeous island nation of Yuzu no Kuni. She enjoyed the sea, the sand, warm climates, all of that. She had spent most of her life surrounded by these things and had a legitimate fondness for them. None of that was to be found in the desert except for the sand. Too much sand. Everywhere. Including in her shoes. And relentless, oppressive heat. Dry heat. She could feel the damage it was doing to her skin already, and she was none too pleased about it. There was relief in sight, however, as the towering skyscrapers that comprised Soraku to outsiders came into view. It was an imposing sight for people used to only smaller villages with buildings that didn't get much higher than 5 stories. Okay, Kushina said, weary from the heat of the sun beating down on her. I know I was perfectly willing to come out here, but I'm cashing in on my right to bitch about this place. What's the matter? Minato asked. Kushina had been rather irritable and jumpy from the moment the trip started, but that was more because they were on a quest to find someone that could help save their son's life. Kushina turned a travel-weary gaze onto her husband. Unlike the biome she was currently suffering in, there was no heat behind it. Other than the fact that I'm a ginger girl in the middle of the fuck-mothering desert? You're not a ginger. You're just red-headed. Nagato is a ginger, Minato pointed out. You have too much color in your skin. It was fair, but it wasn't pale. Kushina shook her head. Do you have any idea how hard it was just to get this skin tone on purpose without burning the hell out of myself every time I tried? All of that trial and error, mixed with multiple sunburns over the course of her early life. Just thinking about it made her skin hurt. Of course, that could have also been the sunburn she was probably developing at that moment. This is not from birth, honey. I had to earn it. Like how an angel earns its wings? Kakashi chimed in from where he was bringing up the rear of their travel formation. Kushina was not amused by the elite ninja's smart remarks at the moment. Shut up, Kakashi, she said. It's too hot to banter with you. I'll just bury you head first in the sand if you keep it up. Kakashi snorted in amusement at Kushina's discomfort. You lived on an island for most of your life. How is the heat such a big problem? He asked. Kushina glared in his direction, forgetting any kind of joy from her current circumstance. It's not the heat, it's the sun. And unlike here, Yuzu no Kuni has these things called water and shade. Between the trees and the way our genius ginger-ass ancestors set the layout of the village, there was a lot of both. Fortunately, as time passed, a dark blot in the distance started getting larger and larger the closer they moved to it. Kushina let out a sigh of relief when she realized that she wasn't delirious enough for it to be a mirage. They were almost to the city. From that point time passed quickly until they were finally walking amid the towering buildings that kept the sun from beating down on its inhabitants the farther they went in. The second they got well within the city limits, Kushina had Minato create a marker somewhere so that she would never have to walk the desert again to get there. Not as long as she was with him, at least. She didn't see herself heading back into Kaze no Kuni by herself for much of anything in the foreseeable future. With the destination in sight, the trek to Soraku was much more tolerable for Kushina, whose mood had improved considerably once they were covered from the bright, harsh daylight by the shadows of the city. It felt at least 10 degrees cooler, and Kushina basked in the lower temperature, shutting her eyes and bathing in shadow as though it were sunlight to a shut-in. God, this is so much better. Another hour out in that, and I would have been a 2-legged lobster. Minato chuckled at his wife's relief at being out of the heat. Some people just weren't built for some climates, apparently. Apparently, Soraku was built with the tallest buildings around the outskirts so that the farther into the city you go, the cooler things get. There's always a measure of shade, you see. Being a previous world traveler made Minato rather textbook knowledgeable about many places, whether he had been to them before or not. You're such a nerd, Han, Kushina said with a laugh as they walked through Soraku. I guess living in this hellhole called the desert would give you all kinds of ways to cheat and beat the heat. Let's find this person we're after and jolt on back to Naruto before I snap out of it and realize I have heat stroke. Now she was definitely exaggerating, and Minato called her on it. Do you really hate the desert that much? He asked, only to get a deadpan look in return. Apparently, yes. Okay, let's get to work. Kakashi, who is this person and how do we find them? Kakashi scratched his chin underneath his mask as he looked around and took in the sights of the big city. It was certainly the largest he had ever been to. I've never come here either, you know. But she is well known, he explained. My best guess is that we ask around, for starters. It shouldn't take too terribly long. Kushina grinned as she sidled up to Kakashi, who leveled her with a suspicious look due to her close proximity. You seem a lot more upbeat about this than you were back when we were back with the kids, she pointed out. Kakashi's single visible eyebrow rose in interest. What do you mean? You seemed really uncomfortable when you were talking about medics that you knew, the first lady of Namake's Minato's village movement said. Did you do something to this one that would make her want your head, or what? Kushina's attempt to needle Kakashi didn't result in the desired playful banter she'd been after. Instead, Kakashi visibly winced and put some distance between himself and the others. Not to this one. It just brings up bad memories whenever I think of Medic Nin, he said cryptically before beginning to ingratiate with the crowd as he went his own separate way from Minato and Kushina. I'll go ahead and start asking around. In a place like this, information is easy to come by. Even if her whereabouts were a secret, they wouldn't be a well-kept one. They lost sight of him before they lost the sound of his voice as it too eventually melded with the crowd noise. Kushina suddenly felt bad, as though she'd pushed something she shouldn't have. But she'd had no idea that Kakashi would be touchy about the subject. Kakashi wasn't touchy about anything. What was with that? Even for him, that was pretty flighty. Kushina mumbled. Minato stared in the direction that Kakashi had gone for several seconds before paying the redhead at his side attention once more. How much do you know about Kakashi before he started working with me? He asked. That was a good question. Kushina trusted Kakashi. She knew how to get in touch with him even when she'd been isolated on Yuzuno Kuni. She trusted him with the safety of her firstborn child at a time when she couldn't even trust her own clan with it. She'd worked toward the same goal he too had been working toward for years, but in the end, the answer was still disappointingly obvious. All of nothing, she said with a loose shrug. I just know that he'd march himself off a cliff if you told him to, and if Jiraiya wasn't around he'd be right there in the old perv's spot in the pecking order. Which was right below Minato, all things considered. And Jiraiya was only there because of his strength and ability, his seniority in the ninja world, and his place as the man who taught Minato how to be a shinobi in the first place. Kakashi's place had been earned with deeds that he performed since he'd met Minato as a young teenager. Thinking of those days made Minato remember just how much of a hard case the masked scarecrow of a man used to be. Kakashi's had a pretty checkered past. Believe it or not, he used to be worse than he is now when it came to people. He was raised from day one to be a complete mercenary, and that's how he lived, even years after his father died. Believe it or not, he's much better now than he was when we met. The Kakashi of now was sarcastic, unpleasant, eerie in his ability to convey tranquil anger, and didn't seem to care about much. Least of all the majority of the people around him at any given moment. What in the hell was he like when you met? Now that was something that Minato didn't want to think about. He'd take the Kakashi of today in a heartbeat over the 13-year-old Kakashi he'd first come across. Imagine a Kakashi about Naruto's age. Kushina shut her eyes and nodded as she did what he'd asked. Ah, little Kakashi was adorable in her mind. Minato quickly killed that image. Now imagine him covered in the blood of the countless battles you know he'd fought by the time you looked at him, with the deadest look you've ever seen in the eyes of someone who's still alive, and one of those eyes isn't his. Kushina shivered at the detailed verbal demonstration that her husband had given. But that only gave way to another question. One that she could have sworn had been asked hundreds of times by the kids, but had never been answered. Minato, she said slowly. How did Kakashi get his Sharingan? And that was one question that Minato wouldn't budge on, even to his beloved wife that he shared any and everything with. It's not my place to say. All I can tell you is that it has a lot to do with why he's sensitive about the whole Medic Nin topic. The couple left it at that and returned their attention to the pressing mission of finding the person who could help them cure their son of what ailed him. XXX, with Naruto, Kuni, Tenten kept a close, watchful eye on Naruto as they walked around the village. Naruto still hadn't been able to go out and get his bearings since they had arrived, and it was a very small place to begin with. For that reason, she figured it would be fine for him to get a bit of exercise. Keeping Naruto cooped up for any considerable period of time while he could still move about was an awful idea for the sanity of those around him. Naruto stood up straight, and to a faraway observer, his gait would have seemed normal. However, Tenten was close to him and could see him wince every so often as he tried to keep his method of walking as normal as possible. "How are you holding up?" "I'm good," Naruto replied quickly, and entirely unconvincingly. "Are you sure?" Tenten said skeptically. Naruto let out a huff upon being pressed, the sound distorted through his rebreather. "I don't friggin' know. Of course I think I'm good. I'll always think I'm good until I fall out in the street," he told her honestly. At first, Tenten didn't know how to respond. It took a moment for her to jump to the next obvious question. "Well, are you close to that happening?" "No." "Good." The two friends left it at that. Now that he was up getting himself around again, it would have taken a considerable effort to get Naruto to stop. If he had the strength to feign passable health, he had the strength to make any argument to get him to go back to bed very unpleasant. He was stubborn like that. "I was expecting to see a lot more Hyugas around here," Naruto said. "I thought a bunch of them came in with Hinata and Niji." "They're land scouting," Tenten informed him. Naruto stopped and turned to Tenten with a strange look in his eye. "They're already picking where they want for their grounds?" he asked in disbelief. "We haven't even gotten this place set up to agree to have us yet." "First come, first serve, I guess," Tenten said with a shrug, not seeing what the big deal was. "Hopefully your dad can put his foot down so they don't take an unnecessarily huge chunk of land. I just hope they realize they're probably not getting a big-ass castle like they have in Hai no Kuni." She had missed just what the major issue was. The problem wasn't that the Hyugas wanted a slab of turf for their people. The problem was if they were doing something about it right then and there. If they were just talking about it, and having a look, that was fine. If they were clearing land and leveling out space, things would become difficult. Even if the people of the village had no problem with it, that wasn't the issue. They were in the realm of a feudal lord. None of them had the freedom to make any stakes of land. The fact that they were scoping out a village to establish their own military state would be seen as a threat or a challenge without first receiving the permission of the daimyo of the country. Minato had yet to do that. He had only come out there to check things over for the time being before heading off to find a way to speak with the daimyo if it was all to his liking. While the Hyugas were correct in that they would eventually be needed to help get things going building-wise sooner rather than later, they were jumping the gun. When it was time to pay the tribute tax, the imperial collectors would find what was going on in a heartbeat. From there, violence would ensue. It had happened on smaller scales before when previous mistakes had been made. "Tenten, are they cutting stuff down yet?" The answer to his question came from the sound of falling trees coming from not too far outside of the tiny village they stood at the edge of. "Shit shit shit!" Even if his body howled at him to stop moving so suddenly, Naruto forced himself to race over to where land was beginning to be cleared, hoping that they hadn't done too much in the time he'd been down and out. Fortunately, it seemed like they had started the day before, after Minato had left, because there weren't too many downed trees when he stumbled upon the groups set to work. He was quick to try and put a stop to that before things went south. Waving his arms to get attention, all Hyuga clan members who had their Byakugan active saw Naruto coming before he'd even seen them. Work halted as the son of the man trying to bring together as many clans as possible rushed to the middle of the would-be clearing to address them. "Hey, you guys have gotta stop! We can't start doing this yet! Our people came here to begin setting this village initiative into motion," one of the older Hyuga clan members currently working said to Naruto in a calm, cool voice. The fact that most of them spoke like Niji was a little jarring, since he was the only Hyuga male that Naruto was used to having extended conversations with. "Our clan head Hashirama was promised a new place with fresh business, and grounds that could rival the stronghold that we left to come here. Basically, it was time for them to take the chunk that they wanted while the getting was good. They were the first clan supporting Minato's ideals to show up in any kind of considerable numbers. They were doing what was best for their own interests, seeing to their own wants and needs first. There wasn't really anyone else around who could make them slow down or stop. "I'm not saying you won't get it. I'm saying just wait a bit," Naruto said, tapping his foot on the ground impatiently. "I don't want to fight off Imperial soldiers just because you guys can't deal with living off of the land for a bit." Tenten covered her mouth and whispered over to Naruto. "Says the guy posted up in the town's inn? Not fucking helping right now," he hissed back in return. "Why are you wearing that over your nose and mouth?" one of the Hyugas finally asked, most of them having wondered why Naruto had taken to wearing such a thing randomly. Naruto gave a dull look over to the person that had taken that serious moment to question his choice of accessories. Because if I take it off, I'll kill all of you. He drawled bluntly, eliciting an elbow from Tenten that hurt more than usual. Oh. What? I will. The truth was the truth. He didn't have any problems misleading others, just so long as he wasn't asked to lie directly. He was no good at it. Murmuring went up between the amassed Hyuga clan members after Naruto's statement. Naruto of the Nine Tails is so dangerous he has to wear a rebreather to filter the air from his own lungs, lest it kill enemies and allies alike. Tenten glared at Naruto, trying to will him with her eyes to keep this from being blown any further out of proportion. It didn't quite work. That's not wrong, he said. How powerful can a Jinchuriki get? Is this true? I've never seen him in battle. There's a reason for that. He has the power of a Biju inside of him. I wouldn't doubt it. Tenten's jaw fell at what she was hearing. Oh my god, you've got to be kidding me. Once again, another misinterpretation of something about Naruto had led to another wild exaggeration. This seriously can't be getting tacked on to those stupid urban legends. It can't. It was almost too stupid for Tenten to allow to happen. But if it got them to stop without anyone's feathers being ruffled, there wasn't much she could say about it. At that moment, the entire clearing was covered in a thick plume of smoke that came from seemingly nowhere before a loud croak sounded out in the air. With Byakugans active, the Hyuga clan members weren't surprised by the sudden entrance, nor were Naruto and Tenten. They had seen this before. Even though they could hardly see each other, they knew when they looked at each other that they were both rolling their eyes. With a few hand seals, Naruto managed to blow the smoke away before the person responsible for it had everything in position to deliver his intro. Jiraiya was caught while unsealing one of the banners he had brought to hang up around him, and the large toad he'd summoned to create the smoke. Upon realizing his predicament, Jiraiya turned to Naruto, his face quickly turning red. Brat! Jiraiya snapped, quickly throwing the banner at Naruto now that it was useless to him. What the hell? You messed up my entrance. Naruto was glad to see Jiraiya, the man who had a serious hand in training him and teaching him how to survive in battle. Even so, the man had a series of eccentricities that were too overbearing for Naruto to deal with sometimes. The two grated on each other's nerves easily. Naruto ducked out of the way of flying banner and pointed defiantly at the toad summoning ninja. They knew it was you already. We all knew it was you. Jiraiya stomped right up to Naruto, who followed suit and met him halfway, the two going nose to nose. That's not the point. It's not to show people who I am. It's a trademark. When Jiraiya arrives, the people expect dash. It was then in close proximity that he noticed Naruto's rebreather, which was becoming a theme. Why the hell is that on your face? Naruto pulled Jiraiya in closer and told him the reason why in confidence. Jiraiya's face quickly went grim at the sensitive information. Ugh. No wonder Minato asked me to come instead of just leaving you lot here. Why are you here, Jiraiya-sama? Tenten asked, actually respecting the man's strength and authority. I'm here to make sure you all don't burn down this village and everything in it before your father gets back. A wry smile came to the older man's face as he gestured to the Hyuga clan attempting to clear land. It seems I made it here just in time. Naruto glared half-heartedly. I had it under control. Certainly it hadn't been the smoothest way to get things to go his way, but this time it just so happened to work. Jiraiya reached out and ruffled Naruto's hair before his hand was swatted away. Nice try, but you're not exactly a diplomat. Moving past Naruto, he cleared his throat before raising his voice. Alright, let's break this up. The kid's right. You can't just start building, even if you're just staking a claim and laying the groundwork for later. Is there a certain plan for this area that we weren't informed of when we arrived here, Jiraiya-sama? No, that's not the problem. Jiraiya explained. This isn't free land to be taken at will. It's not like we've talked about this to any daimyos yet. If word gets back that we're making land claims, there'll be serious trouble. XXX Hai no Kuni, Fire Daimyo's court, knuckles white with anger, the Fire Daimyo clutched tightly at the maps and images that had been given to him by the guest of his court. Why are you even giving me this information? The location of a village in a very rural part of neighboring Kuni was housing aspects of the potentially dangerous outfit gathered by Namake's Minato. It hadn't been long ago that he had been warned of this rogue element, and now it was manifesting itself within borders of lands that he influenced. Danzo stood before the daimyo, who sat behind a curtain as he listened to the mysterious old man. As I told you before, it is in all of our best interests if this never comes to pass. This time, No trickery or risks needed to be taken to get an audience with the ruler of Hai no Kuni. He had left a strong enough impression and given him and his advisors enough to think about after their first startling meeting. They had reached out to him for his counsel. Shinobi were the best suited to find solutions to shinobi problems. At least, that was the idea. A warning will not be enough, Danzo told the fire daimyo. In the end, the only solution I've ever seen be effective against my ilk is force. This was not the solution that the fire daimyo wanted to hear. I will not send my standing army into the meat grinder that is a battle with the yellow flash, he said sternly. Though not because of his apprehension to battle. It was just a rational course of action. The man is a known army killer. Danzo shook his head. You don't need your army. All you need are the guardian ninja. The massive room had been quiet before, but the silence became eerie after Danzo's proposal. No matter how long it dragged on, there was no chance of Danzo taking his words back. Eventually, the fire daimyo had to address the matter. How do you know about them? A shrewd smile came to Danzo's face. My lord, they're a poorly kept secret, and you know it. The fire daimyo's fake surprise quickly fell, his attempted veil of deceit being rendered worthless. True. But then again, most people don't have the courage to speak about them aloud. The Guardian Ninja were a group of powerful shinobi, somehow swayed into the service of the fire daimyo. However it was done, they all served in secrecy. Though not really, the word around the court was that no one was supposed to know that they existed. Most civilians in Hai no Kuni didn't. All nobles did. But even they didn't know anything about them beyond that. Not their names. Not their abilities. Not what they looked like. Nothing that could help a potential dissenter prepare for the eventual clandestine attack that would come his way once the fire daimyo learned of the danger that you represented. That mystery, coupled with just enough information to make your mind run wild, and the rarity of anyone finding enough evidence to credit them for doing just about anything that they became associated with in regards to their feats, inspired fear. It was all according to the fire daimyo's own preference to keep things in check. Fear was the emotion that led to the easiest obedience from those with lesser power. The Guardian Ninja were a tool primarily used to maintain order. They worked on their own freelance missions, but came when they were summoned by the fire daimyo, which was rare. Danzo wanted them front and center to take out the people he had identified as an enemy. And now that he had convinced the fire daimyo that they were a future enemy to him as well, it was just a matter of getting him to set them in action. Danzo smiled disarmingly, all the more effective with his frail, injured appearance. I'm just an old man, daimyo-sama. I've lived long enough and survived so many things that I shouldn't have that death only seems like the door to the next stage of existence. If my death for knowing about the Guardian Ninja is the price I have to pay to warn someone who can do something about this accursed gathering of shinobi clans, so be it. You are that person. Call for the Guardians. And turn a country that pays tribute to me into a war zone? The fire daimyo said skeptically. He was aware of the might of the man who led this movement. I will not sit here and pretend that a fight against forces led by the Yellow Flash can end in anything else than outright bloodshed. It seemed that Danzo had the proper response to everything. He was not set back by the fire daimyo's distaste for taking on Namikaze Minato directly. Danzo wouldn't have done such a foolish thing either. It was why he was working so hard to enlist another formidable force to do it instead. The Yellow Flash is away from the main group, along with 2 others of his inner circle, the bandaged old shinobi said. There are children and out-of-shape veterans stationed in this place. Blood will have to be shed, but not much of yours. As I have shown you, the village leader is a traitor for agreeing to, so anything that happens to that part of your country should only be seen as a warning to the rest of your domain. Danzo's words were convincing. A mix of flattery in regards to the military might that his mark potentially commanded, and confidence in his judgment to move in order to protect his power in Hai no Kuni and abroad. Threats against the daimyo's standing were to be snuffed out by a leader who had the means to do so and to replace what would physically be lost in the process. Homes could be rebuilt, crops could be regrown, and areas could be resettled if destruction was truly that complete. In the end, it could be argued that in regards to the fire daimyo's complete control of the country, an attack would be the economical choice. Break the back of this entire farce of an idea, Danzo said to drive home his point. No one will ever question Hai no Kuni's might or standing, and no other mercenary outfit will ever attempt a power grab of this sort again under your reign, be it Senju, Uchiha, or otherwise. XXX, 1 day later, Soraku. It had taken a day of tracking down information, But in the end, it hadn't been as difficult to locate the person Kakashi promised they could find in the city. Kushina stepped out of the way, giving a wide berth to a pair of local kids who ran past her laughing. Not that she didn't love children, but they were in the part of town that statistically figured there was a better chance than not that one of those kids was a pickpocket. "Why is this place so out of the way?" she asked, walking with Minato and Kakashi through the alley that the latter had led them to. "I can understand wanting secrecy. This lady isn't exactly a people person," Kakashi explained, maneuvering past the people in their way as he led on. "She's been around for a long time, and apparently seen enough to the point where she doesn't have a lot of faith in the future of the shinobi world." Minato smiled brightly at the thought that he and this medic shared some common ground. "Well, that's at least one thing we have similar thoughts on." "That's good." Kakashi turned around and shook his head silently. "No?" Kakashi hated to debunk the man's hopes that things would be simple, but it was better that he went in mentally prepared. "Minato-sama, you are severely underestimating just how jaded this woman is. Just from word of mouth, well, let's just say I don't expect an easy time of it. Here we are." They had come to a section of alley cordoned off by thick sections of curtains. They could see nothing beyond them, and they didn't seem to serve a purpose. Other places in the city, mostly around the outskirts, used them to block whatever blowing sand and heat creating sunlight their position in the city didn't keep from reaching, plaguing them. Their application in this alley was not as practical, but there was an intimidating aspect to them. Minato wished he could see past them to what lay beyond, but that was likely one of the points to them being there. "I'll go alone," he declared. Before he could step forward, Kushina grabbed his forearm to stall his progress. "Why?" she asked, brow furrowed. They had come there together. She had expected them to go together the entire way. "If I wind up in a trap, it's better if there are people outside instead of all of us getting stuck together," Minato said as he started to head down. "Besides, we're asking for help here. It would probably go smoother if it was one-on-one. It would make it seem like the requested is instead of a veiled threat." It was just another reason not to invite Kushina along, unfortunately enough. She was a very emotional woman, and their son was involved. If things didn't go smoothly, she would be quick to turn things into chaos. "Just so you know, I have no problems with making this a veiled threat," Kushina called after him, only proving that point. "I know," Minato answered back, his voice getting more distant. "If it was you, it wouldn't even be veiled. It's the thought that counts," he heard Kushina say to him before he began to focus on what was ahead of him instead. Minto moved past layer after layer of curtains, taking great care that this wasn't some sort of ambush. Eventually, he came to a door on the other side and took a breath before opening it and stepping inside. The darkened parlor he stepped into was covered wall to wall, floor to ceiling in combat puppets. Even if they weren't moving, those things were creepy. "They're not operational," an old man's voice called out to him, directing Minato's attention to the far end of the hall. "You don't have to worry. My sister and I make these puppets as something more of a hobby nowadays. We don't build them for other shinobi any longer." Minato got closer and saw an old man with thick, long eyebrows and heavy-lidded eyelids, making it seem as though they were closed. He wore a turban and loose-fitting robes that many desert-dwelling folks chose to dress in. "Hello, my name is Namikaze Minato." Minato introduced himself, bowing respectfully to the elderly man. "I don't want to impose on you for too long. I've come to speak with the medic known as Chio." "Ah, you're that man," the old shinobi said, apparently recognizing Minato's name. "Very well then. Come with me." Minato followed him deeper into the dingy building, eventually coming to a pond set up in the middle in an outdoor courtyard. "Sister, we have a visitor," he said, as he then left them alone. Minato took a moment to take in the splendor of the modest little hideaway and then turned his attention to the old woman sitting at the other side of the pond. She had gray hair held in a bun and wore desert robes similar to the old man who had greeted him, as well as a brown headband. Her eyes were closed peacefully as a fishing rod rested in her grasp. Smiling amicably, Minato walked over to her side and bowed, introducing himself similarly as to how he did to the old man, only to get no response. After a few seconds still in his bow, he used the closer proximity to scrutinize the old woman and found no signs of life coming from her. No color in her face, nor any sign of breathing. Was she faking being dead just to get out of speaking with him, instead of jumping to conclusions, losing his temper, or trying to force the issue any? Minato simply sat down next to her at the side of the pond and waited patiently. Minutes dragged on, with Minato never saying anything. He just took the opportunity to enjoy the tranquility. Very rarely did he get the chance to simply sit and rest. There was always something that needed to be done, something to ponder about the future. After quite some time of just absorbing the atmosphere of the courtyard, he spoke to the non-responsive Chio. You know, if you really were to have died here, I couldn't think of few better places to pass on, he said, somewhat playing along with her faux death ruse. I like this place. It took close to a minute, but Chio did eventually respond to him. I do too. That's why my brother and I have it to ourselves, she said, opening her eyes and looking Minato's way as she began to move around. I don't know why Ebizo let you in, but you're here now, and it doesn't look like you're leaving until you say what you need to say. So what do you want? Minato took a deep breath before he began to explain his circumstances. I'm sure you're aware of the Uchiha clan bioweapon. Chio snorted in an undignified manner. Disgusting piece of work. Hard to believe human hands created such a thing. We've come across formula for the antidote, only we don't know where to find the materials, or what most of them even are. Minato continued, reaching into his clothes and pulling out a copy of the formula that he had taken down from Tenten. That's why I came to you. A lot of what's on this list is apparently rare, and we don't have any high-level medic need with us that could help. Chio took a long, hard look at Minato, an impassive look in her eyes as she scrutinized the man before her. And why should I help you? Having someone willing to make an antidote that's unaffiliated with any clan wouldn't just help me. It would help countless people caught up in the battles between the Senju clan and the Uchiha clan. Minato offered with a smile. You would save lives. No reaction from the wizened old woman. And of course, I would be willing to compensate you more than fairly. For something like this, money isn't in dash. Chio cut him off before he could attempt to appeal to her wallet. It's not an issue of money, kiddo, she said. I don't need money. As a matter of fact, there's nothing in particular you have that I want. Minato narrowed his eyes. Chio wasn't going to do anything for him. She wasn't beating around the bush, but she was being evasive on saying no directly. You won't help. He didn't have to be an expert at reading between the lines to tell that much. A silence fell between the two of them as Chio turned her attention to the fishing rod in her hands. Minato's mood had dropped significantly since he'd come into the building. The optimism he'd brought with his party to Soraku was slowly slipping away, and the woman before him was the one responsible. Yet he didn't leave. No matter how Chio tried to ignore his presence, he remained seated nearby. Until she gave him a definite no, he was not getting up and walking out of that place. Eventually tiring of the tense silence, the resident medic was the first to speak the next time. I'm old, Chio said bluntly. There used to be a time when I believed that one day, all of the killing would stop. I became a medic because I wanted to save as many lives as I could, so that we could all see that day. But no. Every day, shinobi come up with new, crueler ways to destroy each other. My medical expertise was twisted into coming up with better, stronger poisons to kill my enemies and the enemies of my family. So she had been a sand nomad. Clearly not any longer, as settling down in any place was simply not what they did, especially a place as large as Soraku. With a wry, meaningless smile, Chio continued. Your words sound sweet. It's nice to think about, that your idea would make the world a better place. But as far as I can see, you'll have just come up with a more organized way for the little boys and little girls of this world to learn how to kill each other. I did. Minato let out an entirely humorless laugh. He'd had aspects of his dream thrown in his face before, about how it was impossible to coordinate the respective clans to work together for the good of them all on a large scale. About how his village would cannibalize itself before it even reached its second generation. But it was the first time that he was told that even if it all came together, it still wouldn't matter in the end. You're right. I may fail. And even if I succeed, a lot might not change. He was willing to admit after taking a long, hard look at the road ahead, and what might have awaited him at the end of it. But it's better than sitting back, knowing that the way things are now, it's not sustainable. The shinobi sect will bleed itself out. We'll wipe ourselves from the face of the earth. I refuse to do nothing when I believe in my heart that this is the right thing to do. That it will make things better. But because you're jaded and broken, you won't help us? His blue-eyed stare became icy cold. Chio swore she could feel a chill on her heart just from the imposing look she was receiving. It was impressive. You'll let my son die because you've seen how ugly this world is and you don't believe in it anymore? Ah yes, your son. Chiyo's wrinkled mouth pulled back in a smile, having finally come to the heart of the matter. This was the purpose Minato had come for, of course. The main reason even half of these clans are listening to anything you have to say about banding together. Stand with us to make peace, or be annihilated by the son of the Yellow Flash, the youngster that wields the power of the strongest of the nine-tailed beasts. Minato was thoroughly offended. He knew the thought existed. Kushina and Naruto thought it sometimes, even if they didn't say it. He knew Tenten definitely did. He could see it in her eyes when she sent Naruto on certain missions. She was a good little soldier, but her loyalty to Naruto was built on time in the trenches. It was true friendship. However, to hear it aloud from this judgmental old woman was simply more than he would bear. I don't use Naruto as a threat against clans. Never actively. It was always implied. Minato knew that Naruto wasn't dangerous. Kurama was locked up tight behind the incredible sealing handiwork of Kushina, and Naruto seemed to be on good terms with the fox regardless. It was everyone else with their preconceived notions that had turned Naruto into something modern-day bedtime stories were told about to scare young children. Chiyo's elderly cackle would have made a lesser person's bones rattle at the sound. Even worse then. Whether it's actively done or not, you've allowed this picture to be painted of Naruto of the Nine Tails. The abomination, the boy with the QB sealed inside of him. A human with all the power of a Biju at his disposal, she said, clicking her tongue in disappointment. You have your child positioned to be something akin to your secret weapon, only there's no real threat behind it. He's a wicked-looking blade with dull edges or a piece of imposing artillery with no ammunition. He's a set piece to your would-be regime. Minato slammed his hands on the table and stood abruptly. Don't call my boy by that title and use it so insultingly, he said, his quiet voice tranquilly holding back the anger he was feeling. You don't get to call him that, speaking the way you are right now. You say his name. His real name. Uzumaki Naruto is a wonderful ninja. The father was willing to bare his teeth for his son. How sweet. So Naruto wasn't a tool to be used, at least not by choice. But the cards one was dealt could only ever be the hand they had to use to play. I'm sure he is. But the reputation of a man is not what you needed to make your outfit known. You needed more, Chiyo continued. Minato let out a sigh and leaned back in his chair, staring up at the haze in the darkened parlor at the ceiling. All I needed was my son. He's given the last 5 years of his life to stand at my side. He never met me until 5 years ago, and yet he was willing to fight and work for my dream. At least you're willing to refer to him as a human being. Chiyo let out a hum at the bit of common ground finally found between the two. I've never bought into the foolish notion that a Jinchuriki is anything more than a person. A person with extraordinary, unstable power at their disposal, but still just flesh and blood in the end. Even if it came with a caveat, now that he had an opening in their discussion, Minato pounced all over it. So you acknowledge that my boy is just that, a boy. Not a monster, not an abomination. He's a 14-year-old boy with a future. I'm begging you. 14. Chiyo said, trying out the word in her mouth, trying to find some sort of meaning in it beyond what it was meant to describe. She found none. It was a number to an age, nothing more. Namikaze-san, children die all the time. Younger than your son. I've seen them. I see it almost every day. She spat bitterly. And you want me to save him? Why should I? Saving his life will likely end dozens, if not hundreds more lives indirectly in the future. This was nothing more than a conversation with a brick wall. Minato could find no way to convince her, no way to get through to her. Other than the fact that I'm paying an arm and a leg, that I'm offering you a free service of your choice in the future? He said sarcastically. You can make more of it on your own. If not for Naruto, my son, realized that you would save so many others. Playing on her sense of philanthropy now, was he? Very well then. It was time to shoot that notion down as well. Most of the goodwill for her fellow man that she'd had in the past withered and died a long time ago. If it became known that I had the cure, what would it have mattered in the end? People come to me to buy the cure to the 5 elements virus, and then what? They or someone else will simply go on to create something even worse. This isn't the point. The point is that you have nothing. Nothing to inspire me to take any sort of action. Chiyo took a pause as a small smile came to her wrinkled lips. Well, that's not entirely true. What I want from you is to see if you're really the kind of man you hold yourself up to be. Minato worked his jaw around, as if trying to test any words that came to mind before they could fly out. Everything he thought of came with some sort of horrendous curse word attached to it. I want to see how much conviction you truly have. Will you stay the course, even knowing that you could realistically lose everything you love in the process? I want to see just what kind of legs your little movement has to stand on. Without the cloud of the Jinchuriki hanging over the heads of your allies, I wonder if they would still rally to your cause. With that, Minato stood back up, smoothing out his clothes and turning to leave, as dignified as possible. A simple no would have sufficed. He said calmly as he strode away, I could have used the time I wasted listening to you trying to think of another way to save my son. I only hope that if I ever reach your age, I won't be as bitter and regretful as you seem to be. Goodbye. Before he could get away entirely, Chiyo's voice, now taunting to him despite the fact that her tone did not lend to such thoughts, reached out to him. When you lose your son the way I lost my son, my daughter-in-law and even my grandson, come back and say the same thing. She said earnestly. If you can, and you make me believe you're the man you carry yourself as, the antidote will still be important to you, and I'll gather the materials to make it then. As many as you need. He barely chose to listen. What they needed clearly wasn't here. By the second half of her declaration, he was halfway down the parlor and out of the door. XXX, with Naruto, Kuni, despite the fact that he was the spitting image of Minato, Naruto fought much more like Jiraiya or even Kushina. Application of force whenever available, first and foremost. Minato tried to give him some pointers on trying to fight like him, but Naruto lacked the finesse and speed to make it work for him. It didn't help that Minato had been taught in a way that was counterproductive to Naruto's teaching. Minato's style had been adjusted to use as few hand seals as necessary for more speed. Naruto used many hand seals, because of his proficiency in Fuinjutsu as a little boy. Fortunately, Jiraiya was a good drill instructor capable of nurturing a fighting method that suited Naruto, while he had been whipping him into true shinobi shape. While Naruto might not have lived up to the hearsay that existed about him as a Jinchuriki, he was getting closer to it every day. Well, he had been, before he'd come down with the 5 elements virus. Thinking about that was depressing enough to draw Naruto out of his technique training. Man, he thought, looking at his own shaking hands as he stood alone by a massive rock, scarred and missing chunks from his constant attacks, it isn't really gonna end like this, is it? Clenching his hands caused great pain, and he could feel his grip's strength getting weaker and weaker. Kurama? I don't know what to tell you, Kurama said to Naruto alone. Whatever will be, will be. You're surprisingly zen about this, Naruto thought back in return. I thought you'd be raging right about now. Maybe later, Kurama told the young Jinchuriki, with a calmness that Naruto hadn't expected. Right now I've just been looking back on my life and realizing how amazing it was. I really made the most of the whole terrifying, all-powerful chakra monster thing. Did you know that? I mean, I've seen clans rise and fall, razed budding nations to the ground. I even had my own pet human. You did? Who? You, of course. Keep up, Kurama said, ignoring the angry vibes he got from Naruto immediately thereafter. Now that might change, the realer this whole death thing becomes, but for the time being, I don't care. Think you could get some of that calm to rub off on me? It's not necessary. You just need something to do. True enough. With nothing to occupy himself with, Naruto's thoughts of his own mortality were that much more prominent. His attention span wasn't large enough to preoccupy himself with the little things for long. Darkness suddenly filled Naruto's vision as a hand covered his eyes playfully. Guess who? Naruto grinned underneath his rebreather, as he could not only feel the hand, he could feel the fact that the ground was no longer beneath him. He only had one friend that he knew of who could fly, let alone fly and easily hold him up at the same time. Hey, Fu. Instead of answering immediately, Fu took a moment to remove her hand from Naruto's eyes to give him a proper hug from behind. The hug kind of hurt, because Fu was very strong, and with his current circumstances he was rather sensitive. But he would take it regardless. It wasn't a big deal. The nice thing about being friends with Fu was that she was always happy to see him. She was happy to see just about anyone that considered her a friend, but she shared the similarity of being a Jinchuriki with Naruto, although her own status as such wasn't nearly as publicized. That gave them something easy to bond over right off the bat, even if she hadn't been absurdly pleasant to be around, which she was. You haven't come to see Fu since you've come to the village, Fu said, her voice taking on a tinge of disappointment. Fu's seen everyone but you. She had to come and find you. Naruto did feel bad about it once she'd brought it up. He'd even seen Anko, yet hadn't seen Fu. Sorry. There's just a lot of stuff going on right now. I don't think it'd be a lot of fun to be around me anyway. Especially with what was to start getting worse soon. The green-haired girl frowned and set Naruto down on a sturdy limb high up in the trees of the forest. Fu is concerned. Naruto stood and leaned against the trunk of the tree, looking up into the sky to avoid trying to make eye contact. What are you freaked out about? Nothing's wrong. Don't say it's nothing. It's not nothing. Fu exclaimed, stepping closer to Naruto. You're sick. Really sick. Naruto winced. He hadn't talked to her about it yet, so he figured she might not have known about it. Unfortunately, she did. Again, it wasn't fair that he hadn't spent any time with her yet to tell her himself. Yeah. I'm guessing you would have heard about that. Fu is afraid for you. The normally peppy girl said quietly, reaching out and taking his hands. What if we can't find a way to get more antidotes made? Naruto shook his head, ridding himself of such a negative idea. Don't think about that. He told her gently before speaking more resolutely. I'm not dead yet. I'm still alive. I'm still up and moving around. I can still fight. There wasn't any giving up now. His heart was still beating. As long as it did, there was still a chance that he would survive. XXX as nice as it was to spend time in a peaceful little village, Anko was bored. It wasn't a knock against the place, it was just that the bulk of her life had been spent fighting for that very life, doing dangerous things for the sake of money and to tickle her fancy. For the time being, the most exciting things she had to look forward to were the local sweets. So is this what your life is like most of the time? Anko asked, taking a bite of the dango she had ordered from the small establishment in town. She had managed to drag Hinata off for company due to the fact that her clan members had next to nothing to do after their plans to begin claiming land for their soon-to-be clan grounds had been postponed. I mean, I know you go on missions some of the time, but you're an heir and everything. They probably have you shut up in an ivory tower most of the time, yeah? Hinata hadn't been familiar with the pushy woman before coming to Kuni to meet with Minato's contingent, but had very quickly gotten to know enough about Mitarashi Anko to wonder why she seemed to like her. They were nothing alike. Hinata started to say unsurely. Not so much. She was well protected quite often, true, but she still did quite a lot of work while she could. She needed the experience in the field now, because she wouldn't be getting it once she was actually in position as the Hyuga clan leader. If I never did anything, my clansmen wouldn't respect me once I took over. The more missions I take successfully, the more faith they'll have in my ability to lead. Anko worked the empty stick around in her mouth idly as she sat in the village square with Hinata. Oh, that makes sense. Is it working? It was a difficult question to answer, and not just because it made her stop and take a good, hard look at herself and her progress. Yes and no, Hinata said. They understand that I have the best intentions in mind for all of them, and I do believe I have their support, but not their faith. They believe much more in my cousin. Niji Nizan is a much better shinobi than I am. So it wasn't strictly a meritocracy, eh? That was rare to see in the elemental nations. So if he's your first cousin and he's that damn good, why isn't he in line to take over? Anko asked, trying to sate her curiosity over what seemed to be a low self-esteem issue for the girl she was spending time with. That'd be good enough for him to have a claim in most clans that operate through lineage. Either she saw how depressed Hinata seemed to get after she posed the question, or figured that any answer she gave would proceed to bore her. On second thought, never you mind. I'm sure it's some complicated clan noise that would take way too long to explain. Hinata was silently thankful. The Hyuga clan had a lot of respect from others for their abilities and the way they carried themselves in the outside world with an air of nobility in what could be a savage world, but the issue of their main family and branch family troubles was a sensitive subject for all of them. Fortunately, it was a gorgeous day outside. Watching the people of the village buzz around them and go about their day was something they could spend quite a bit of time doing before it got old. Since she had come to village a number of days ago, Hinata had taken note of particular people that she saw in certain areas at particular times of the day. It was just part of her clan's way of being attentive to their surroundings. This practice allowed her to pick out a face in the crowd that she had never seen before, something that immediately caught her attention. A man in white and black garments one would expect on a monk blended with the populace better than he had any right to. Almost automatically, Hinata activated her Byakugan and recoiled at the sight that her enhanced vision granted her. Anko squinted curiously at the sight of the man in the robes. He seemed starkly out of place in the small, out-of-the-way village that they were guests of. A monk? Huh, didn't know there was a monastery anywhere around here. She turned to Hinata to get her opinion, but stopped when she saw the stunned look on the girl's face and her mouth somewhat agape in shock. What's the matter with you, sweets? That's that monk, she replied, trying to regain her more dignified manner of speaking. You know him? Enko asked, wondering where on earth she would have come across someone of that nature. Her clan didn't strike her as particularly religious. That's weird. Hinata took a moment to regain her composure and deactivate her Byakugan. She had seen what she needed to, and it was an invasive Jujutsu. She had enough respect for the people around her to only use it when needed. No. It's his chakra. I think that man is dangerous. Enko noticed two things that Hinata likely overlooked, overwhelmed by the apparent potency of his chakra. The strange sash with the kanji for Hai no Kuni on it was the first and most jarring, as it was something associated with what most people had only heard hearsay about. The vaunted Guardian Ninja organization. The second was the fact that he was looking right at the two of them, his dark eyes glaring sternly, brows fixed in a serious expression. You know, I think you might be right about that. Everyone needed to get together, and quickly. If that sash was what Enko thought it was, there was no way this would be good for any of them. XXX. While most of the outsider ninja contingent were quite bored by their current station in Kuni, Shino was quite enjoying himself. It was a country full of thick forests, and better yet, it was a place he had never been before. That meant plenty of insect specimens he had never received the opportunity to study before. It was a shame that Naruto and Tenten couldn't appreciate his hobby, no matter how much the two of them to their credit tried to. But that was fine. It took all different kinds of people to make up the world, and they were still good friends regardless. He wasn't getting the full satisfaction out of his chosen pastime that he normally would have though. This vacation would have been much more relaxing if Naruto hadn't been suffering through a debilitating illness. No matter what he did, his mind always went back to the moment that he and the others were caught in Uchiha Sasuke's distraction that allowed him to escape, and infected them all with the 5 elements virus. Shino's mind always went back to Naruto declining the antidote so that he and Hana could be cured. No matter what happened, even in death Naruto would have his full loyalty for that. As he thought to himself, one of his Kikaichu flew in front of him and buzzed around in a particular pattern. Shino's eyebrows rose behind his sunglasses at the message. He was not alone. Do you always spend time alone, this far away from other people? A woman's voice called out to him at that moment. That's so sad and dangerous. Would you like me to keep you company? Shino rose up and turned around to face the stranger, pushing his sunglasses up on his face. I am never alone. What do you want? He had been approached by a woman with long, flowing dark red hair. She wore a backless dark pink gi with unattached sleeves, light purple shorts that accentuated her attractive figure, and black high-heeled boots. Not even going to ask my name? She said with a seductive smile, bringing attention to the beauty mark underneath her lip. Don't you want to get to know me? The insects inside of Shino buzzed angrily at the threat they could feel this woman potentially posed him. No. Leave. As she walked around, circling the area, the sway of her hips temporarily drew Shino's eyes to the sash at her waist, marked with the kanji for fire. How odd. A boy more interested in playing with bugs than with girls. She taunted lightly. Well, I guess it's up to me to teach you some very important things about women. After all, it's something every man should know before they die.